Pura vida, mi gente. Much love and respect. Thanks for tuning in once again. Appreciate everybody that does that every time. Take, time away from your day to, come listen to me. Read these books and go through the research of the real history, things they hid from us. So today's no different. Now, even though it's gonna end up being a public video on my channel. Right now, guys, this is an exclusive members only live. It's private, so again, thanks for being members. I really appreciate it. I decided, just go ahead and do the live first for the members, and then we'll make it public after I'm done with the live. If you came later on, no worries. You're gonna get the whole presentation. I'm gonna be doing that a lot with certain videos. So if you want to support me that way, you can become a channel member, and we are gonna get a lot of exclusive lives like this, chat exclusives, and exclusive videos too. And yeah, like a couple pictures of me and more updates. I'll do more of that. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. We're gonna get into what is this, part 17, genealogical stories, the series we got going. We could have so many different series going. We're gonna be talking about something very controversial throughout history and until modern times has been accepted. Especially with their DNA tests now. Paternal DNA. They can trace the Y chromosome. All the way to Thomas. Through one of his what they call in concubines or mistresses. A lot of people say he probably had a lot of affection for her, and who knows how she felt about him, but she put up with it. She made agreements with him, and she had several children with him, and that was Sally Hemings. If you guys don't know, all right. So we're gonna go over that story a little bit, and then go over some stuff on the genealogy. A lot of things don't really make sense when they're trying to add their false narratives, try to make people into African slaves and all that, and it just doesn't make sense when we look into who these people are, who their parents are, how very related they are. And yeah, you guys are gonna see what I'm talking about. All right. It's called the Hemings of Monticello. There's even books about it, I'm gonna show you guys. At a point when they didn't have the DNA test, these people were kind of like not taken seriously, Now they are, now they are. We're gonna see a little documentary too later on as a side commentary I'll be doing as well on it. Because we got to dodge a lot of hijacking it. I had to even edit out some opinions and conjectures out of it because I'm not this pointless. You have no proof of that. You're adding that. But anyways, let me just get started. I'm freestyling it because I'm live, guys. I've been working on this for a couple of days. I just kind of ran into me this information and this hidden secret family Thomas Jefferson had. Actually, it's not so secret, but a lot of people still don't know. I hope you guys enjoy again. Let me see. So again, bear with me because we live. So I do have the tree. All right, we're gonna go over that. What does it say real quick here on Wikipedia? It says Jefferson Hemings controversy. The Jefferson Hemings controversy is a historical debate over whether there was a sexual relationship between the widowed U.S. President Thomas Jefferson and his slave and sister-in-law. All right, you guys saw? His slave and what? Sister-in-law. Sister-in-law or slave? Which one is it? Or was it both? So how much? So what's going on? Right, sister-in-law, yeah, Sally Hemings, and whether he fathered some of or all of her 6 recorded children. For more than 150 years, most historians denied rumors that he had a slave concubine, Sally Hemings. Based on his grandson's report, they said that one of his nephews had been the father of Hemings' children. In the 21st century, most historians agree that Jefferson is the father of one or more of Sally's children. Okay. In the 1850s, Jefferson's eldest grandson, Thomas Jefferson Randolph, told historian Henry Randolph that the late Peter Carr, a married nephew of Jefferson's, the son of his sister, had fathered Hemings' children. Randolph asked Randall to refrain from addressing the issue in his biography. Randall passed on this information to James Pardon, another historian. Pardon published a card story. Major historians of Jefferson's generally denied Jefferson's paternity for nearly 150 years. In 1953, new documentation related to this issue was published and studied by historians. In the 1970s, biographer Fawn M. Brody suggested Jefferson had been the father of Hemings' children. In 1997, the controversy was reopened when Annette Gordon Reed published an analysis of the historiography of this issue, deconstructing previous versions and detailing oversights and biases. That year, Ken Burns released his documentary on Jefferson as a PBS series, highlighting the debate and conflicting viewpoints. A changed consensus emerged after a Y chromosome DNA analysis was done in 1998, which showed a match between a descendant of the Jefferson family male line, a descendant of Phil Jefferson, and a descendant of Eston Hemings, Sally's youngest son. It showed no match between the Carr line and the Hemings descendant, and the majority viewed the DNA evidence as consistent with Jefferson being the father of Eston Hemings, plus the historical evidence favors Jefferson's paternity for all of Hemings' children. In June 2018, the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, with introduction of a new exhibit on Sally Hemings, asserted the relationship is settled historical matter. So, even though I'm reading Wikipedia, guys, I'm gonna show you the genealogy. It's now it's not like a scandal, it's not controversy, even though they don't make this public. It's official today. It's official that he did have a so-called slave concubine, which happens to be his sister-in-law. We'll get to that. And yeah, they kept a secret all this time. You know how many of these people, they had a lot of different, servant or slave concubines and children with them. Nothing different here. We're gonna actually learn more and more how common this was actually, right? So, I was just reading that real quick. Now, let's see what's over here. So look at this. Cal State East Bay .edu says here the secret family of Thomas Jefferson. So in November 1998, the press was filled with headlines such as the third president of the United States saddled with paternity suit and DNA proves Jefferson father of slave children. For students of history, however, this was old news. As early as the 1790s, rumors were circulating among the landed gentry of Virginia that Jefferson had taken a slave at Monticello as a concubine. In September 1802, during Jefferson's first term as president, James Callender, a journalistic muckraker with an axe to grind against the president, published a newspaper article claiming that Jefferson had kept a dusky mulatto wench named Sally as his mistress. Jefferson neither confirmed nor denied this allegation during his lifetime, but whispers about it continued for almost 2 centuries until the 1970s, when a number of articles, books, and Hollywood films began to appear strongly suggesting that the story was true. So, just a little of the tree here. This would be his grandfather, his dad, Peter. That's him. And this is Sally. This is their children right here. What we're going to learn today, we're going to see that some of his kids went on to pass as white and live in so-called white society. And the rest of his kids went and stayed so-called black and went and lived in so-called black society. You're going to see, I'm going to show you the records and everything. But they're both coming from who? Thomas and Sally. Okay? So this is one of the guys who did his DNA test down here, and there's a whole story about them. Right? Thomas Jefferson biography. Monticello. That's what the plantation was called where he lived. So Monticello, right? Martha will never see the completion of Monticello, so his first wife kind of died young. She died in the 10th year of their marriage, and Jefferson lost a cherished companion of his life. Their marriage produced 6 children, but only 2 survived into adulthood. Martha, known as Patsy, and Mary, known as Maria and Polly. So the point here is that on his legitimate family's wife side, he had only daughters. So no Y chromosome was passed. All right, guys? Along with the land, Jefferson inherited slaves from his father, and even more slaves from his father-in-law, John Wales. So father-in-law John Wales, right? He also bought, so that means that's his wife's father too, right? So remember, Sally's a sister-in-law, okay? So meaning this guy is Sally's dad too. This is Sally's dad, so-called plantation owner, right? That gave slaves to supposed slaves, right? That's her kid, her kids, his kids, John Wells' kid. You're gonna see, guys. It's not gonna start making sense, but we'll see. He also bought and sold enslaved people. In typical year, he owned about 200, almost half of them, under the age of 16. So remember, we're not saying slavery is not real. Indentured servitude and servitude was real. People contracted for a certain period, and them being born under that status because of their mom, that was true. It's just the way they're telling the narratives, trying to make all these people into, you know, so-called black African slaves that had no kind of history or status or their own names or last names or heritage here in the Americas or in even Europe. So that's what we're kind of trying to break down. I'm going to show you what I mean. How the silly the narratives are with no proof. About 80 of these enslaved individuals lived at Monticello. The others lived on his adjacent Albemarle County farms and on his Poplar Forest estate in Bedford County, Virginia. Over the course of his life, he owned over 600 enslaved people. These men, women, and children were integral to the running of his farms and building and maintaining his home at Monticello. Some were given training in various trades. Some were given training, apprenticeships. Others worked the fields, and some worked inside the main house. Many of the enslaved house servants were members of the Hemings family. So listen, many of the enslaved the house servants, the ones that live inside with the main family, right? With Thomas and his other family, they were members of the Hemings family. Elizabeth Hemings and her children were part of the Wales estate. And tradition says that John Wales was the father of 6 of Hemings' children, and thus they were the half-brothers and sisters of Jefferson's wife, Martha. We just talking about family. When they're saying house servants, yeah, they're family. That's her sisters and brothers living with her. Jefferson gave the Hemingses special positions. Special, they're family. That's his wife's sisters and brothers. And the only slaves Jefferson freed in his lifetime and his will were all Hemingses. Again, his family giving credence to the oral history. Years after his wife's death, Jefferson fathered at least 6 of Sally Hemings' children. 4 survived to adulthood and are mentioned in Jefferson's plantation records. Their daughter Harriet and eldest son Beverly were allowed to leave Monticello during Jefferson's lifetime, and the 2 youngest sons, Madison and Easton, were freed in Jefferson's will. Okay? Alright, again, brief history. Shout out to all the members. Guys, exclusive channel. Members only live right now. We're gonna make this public for sure. And shout out to you if you came later. Consider becoming a member. I might do this more often. So over here says Elizabeth Hemings. We're still in Monticello.org. Monticello. Household servant. The majority of those interviewed for the Getting Word project trace their ancestry to Elizabeth Betty Hemings. According to her grandson Madison Hemings, she was the daughter of an English sea captain named Hemings and an enslaved woman. An English sea captain, a merchant. Merchant, who's the merchant? And an enslaved woman. Okay. Who's this enslaved woman? Because they try to make her into an African person. She came with her children to Monticello about 1775, part of the inheritance from John Wales, Jefferson's father-in-law. So, again, that's his concubine, that's his little girlfriend, right? Over 75 of her, actually, yeah, we'll see you see what I'm talking about. I get confused when I don't got the tree up, but I'll show you what I mean. Over 75 of her descendants lived and worked at Monticello as butlers, seamstresses, weavers, carpenters, blacksmiths, gardeners, and musicians. Again, that was all Jefferson's wife's family. so-called slaves. So Betty Hemings here and her kids, Creta, and here's Sally. This is the one who ended up with Thomas Jefferson. So we're talking about Sally as a sister and a daughter of the same guy who supposedly owned Betty, right? And then, Betty and John Wells had these kids all. So Elizabeth Hemings had 12 known children. According to Madison Hemings, 6 of them were fathered by Wells: Robert, James, Denia, Krita, Peter, and Sally. All of the men and women freed by Jefferson, either officially or unofficially, were her children or grandchildren. Again, family. Oral histories passed through many generations of the descendants of her daughters. Mary Hemings, Belle, Betty Brown, and Sally Hemings include the tradition of descent from Jefferson. Such is the story that comes down to me. So this is what Madison Hemings wrote himself. We're going to read that on another source. All right. So this book, real quick, is Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, An American Controversy. Okay, as you guys can see. I was going to read a little bit. I think I had the page open, and when I refreshed, it didn't save it. Let me see, guys. Again, we live, so bear with me. Thanks for tuning in. There's tables right here. Jefferson and Randolph's. Okay. Okay, let me just read this real quick. Again, we're gonna get a documentary showing us this, telling us this. Where'd it go? Oh, come on. Oh, no. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Hold on. I got this. It's playing with me. Yeah. So Madison Hemings is one of the kids. He left a memoir. Is basically what they're talking about. He left a memoir stating that he was the son, who claims, it says here, among other things, to be the son of Thomas Jefferson by his slave Sally Hemings. Although his statement is the only known recitation of the details of this controversial story by any of the parties involved, it has been either ignored by historians or dismissed out of hand with no attempt to address what Hemings actually said. In addition, he has been attacked through the use of stereotypes about ex-slaves and the circumstances under which they lived that should have been laid to rest long ago, because it would be impossible to exaggerate the level of hostility that the story of Thomas Jefferson's alleged slave mistress has engendered over the years. It is not surprising that Hemings' recollections have not been studied with anything that could be called objectivity. The time for doing that is long overdue, but before beginning an analysis of his statement, it is useful to consider the methods most commonly used to discredit. All right, so I'm going to get his statement here. This is another book. This is The Hemingses of Monticello, An American Family. All right. Oh man, I had all this open, guys, and it didn't. What happens when I do it live? All right, where was I reading? Okay, here we go. John Wayne, Part 2. John Wells, the immigrant, the children of no one. Where did I have this? So what I'm looking for, I think I have it somewhere. Where is it? Uh, let's go back to this. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is what he's wrote here. Such is the story that comes down to me. I was going to read it off this book, or one of these books is more detailed. I don't know. Google kind of changed the pages and kind of blocked some pages. And now it won't let me. I don't know what happened. So we're going to read it over here. It says, I never knew about one white man. Okay, so the other thing is, now he's telling the story in 1873, guys. This was like a long time after Tom and Sally lived. You know, his great grandfather, right, or grandparents. Well, this is his dad, actually. Sorry, my fault. This is his dad, but he really didn't socialize with him. He's gonna explain it. So I never knew about one white man who bore up the name Hemings. He was an Englishman and my great grandfather. Okay, so that's who he's talking about when the Hemings came from. We're gonna show that in the tree. He was captain of an English trading vessel, which sailed between England and Williamsburg, Virginia. This is key. Remember that. Between where did he sail? Between England and Virginia. He was doing it back and forth. That was his route. Not going to Africa. He didn't go to Africa, right? Do we have that clear, right? We have that clear, right, guys? He didn't. This guy, this Hemings guy, this Captain Hemings. My grandmother was a full-blooded African. This is supposedly what he said. Now, this is off a newspaper. This is an interview, supposedly. Is that what he believed? Is that what they told people? Yeah, you guys come from here. And possibly a native of that country, possibly. She was a property of John Wells, a Welshman. Incorrect. She belonged to the Ebbs family. Okay. So they're talking about the so-called African that he didn't even name, which is his grandmother, right? His great-grandmother, which he doesn't even name. What's her name? But she was actually owned by the Ebbs. I'm going to show you in a picture of her and how she's well-dressed. It says she was born Epps. It says that this lady that they call an African, right? It says she was born Epps. And there's really no history of, and they're going to admit, I'm going to read that. That's what I wanted to find. I think that's what I wanted to read. Okay, we're going to look for it. So he was a captain, because you're going to read this, they're going to say that she was raped on the way. It says she was kidnapped from Africa and raped on the way by Captain Hemings before she got to Virginia. This is one of the stories. Again, he sailed between England and Virginia. Okay. She was the property of John Wells. Not really. She was the Epps family. She was actually born in Epps, and I'm going to show you by the end of the video why I think she's actually the daughter of one of these Epps. Again, same thing, by one of his servants. And all these people are supposedly saved. They're actually family. They're being given to other family members so they can stay in the family, not be sold away. And they are being treated differently because they are family. Captain Hemings happened to be in the port of Williamsburg at the time my grandmother was born and acknowledged her fatherhood. He tried to purchase her from Mr. Wells, but would not part with the child, though he was offered an extraordinarily large price for her. She was named Elizabeth Hemings. Being thwarted in the purchase and determining to own his flesh and blood, he resolved to take the child by force or stealth, but the knowledge of his intention coming to John Wells' ears through leaky fellow servants of the mother, she and the child were taken into the great house under their master's immediate care. I have been informed that it was not the extra value of that child over other slave children that included Mr. Wells to refuse to sell it. For slave masters then, as in the later days, had no compunctions of conscience which restrained them from parting mother and child of however tender age, but he was restrained by the fact that just about the time of amalgamation began, and the child was so great a curiosity that its owner desired to raise it himself that he might see its outcome. What do they mean by that? Like, this is interesting. See how she comes up. She might be beautiful. She might work. She might be worth a lot. Captain Hemings soon afterwards sailed from Williamsburg, never to return. That's the story. But supposedly, right, such is the story that comes down to me, not what he experienced. This is what they told me. This is what they told me. 1873 is saying this, right? Oh, she was a full-blooded African. That's what they told me. Elizabeth Hemings grew to womanhood in the family of John Wells, whose wife dying, Elizabeth, was taken by the widower Wells as his concubine, by whom he had 6 children, 3 sons and 3 daughters, Robert, James, Peter, Critty, Sally, and Tina. These children went by the name of Hemings. My very earliest recollection of my grandmother Elizabeth Hemings, that was when I was about 3 years old. She was sick and up on her deathbed. I was eating a piece of bread and asked her if she would have some. She replied, "No, Granny don't want bread anymore." She shortly afterwards breathed her last. I have only faint recollection of her, right? That's what he wrote. In 1873 in the Pike County Republican. That was an interview, a newspaper article wrote it. So now we got to question also did he really say all that? But, that's the official story, what they're saying. Okay. Hmm, Too bad I can't get. Oh, so here's the memoirs. Okay, this is what I was looking for earlier. So, so this is when he kept him soon afterwards sailed from Williamsburg, never to return. Such as the story comes down to me. So let me see. So Williamsburg was the capital of Virginia, and of course it wasn't an aristocratic place where the bloods of the colony and the new state most did congregate. Thomas Jefferson, the author of Declaration of Independence, was educated at William and Mary College, which had its seat at Williamsburg. He afterwards studied law with George Wythe and practiced law at the bar of the General Court of the colony. He was afterwards elected a member of the provincial legislature from Albemarle County. Thomas Jefferson was a visitor of the Great House. Okay, let me see. Okay, so now he's still talking. So he went to the great house, of John Wells, who had children about his own age. He formed the acquaintance of his daughter, Martha. I believe that was her name, though I am not positively sure. And an intimacy sprang up between them, which ripened into love, and they were married. They afterwards went to live at his country seat, Monticello, and in course of time had borne them a daughter whom they named Martha. About the time she was born, my mother, the second daughter of John Wells and Elizabeth Hemings, was born. Remember, John Wells is supposed to be the plantation owner that gave his slaves to Thomas' daughter Martha and him when they got married, but that's actually his girlfriend, right? Slash concubine, and his children he's given away. Children. So on the death of John Wells, my grandmother, his concubine, and her children by him fell to Martha, Thomas Jefferson's wife, and consequently became the property of Thomas Jefferson, who in the course of time became famous and was appointed minister to France during our revolutionary troubles, or soon after independence was gained. About the time of the appointment and before he was ready to leave the country, his wife died, and soon after her interment, as he could attend to and arrange his domestic affairs in accordance with the changed circumstances of his family and consequences of this misfortune. I think not more than 3 weeks thereafter, he left for France, taking his elder daughter with him. He had sons born to him, but they died in early infancy. So he then had but 2 children, Martha and Maria. Remember, that was with his first wife. The latter was left at home, but was afterwards ordered to follow him to France. She was 3 years or so younger than Martha. My mother accompanied her as a body servant. When Mr. Jefferson went to France, Martha was a young woman grown by my mother was about her age, and Maria was just budding into womanhood. Their stay, my mother's and Maria's, was about 18 months. But during that time, my mother became Mr. Jefferson's concubine. There's a big age gap here with Jefferson and Sally. He was very young, he was a lot older. That's when she became his concubine. And when he was called home, he was enceinte by him. Or impregnated, right? He decided to bring my mother back to Virginia with him, but she demurred. She was just beginning to understand the French language well, and in France she was free. While if she returned to Virginia, she would be re-enslaved. So again, we're gonna see a documentary, guys. She did a lot in France. She was a free. Slavery didn't exist over there, so she was like literally officially legally free because she was kind of like a free woman in the estate. She lived in the house. That was his girl, so he didn't like make her go work, and he wasn't mistreating or beating on them or anything like that. He actually had affection for her. He didn't show no love to the kids, but he made sure, he kept them around, and eventually he freed them. But he had his girl there. He had his whatever he thought of her, you know. But yeah, she was in France, and she was, experiencing freedom, and she was actually being trained. Because she was taught as an apprenticeship to sew, stitch, create clothes all throughout her youth, and she grew up doing that and taking care of his other kids, you know, and learning things like they really taught these his kids a lot. And then she went to France and she learned some more things, and she was loving it. She was dealing with like the fashion people, you know, learning all that, learning French. She was free, and then she made an agreement with him. You're gonna see to come back. She didn't just like come back out of force. She couldn't force her. She couldn't force her to come back. Yeah, exactly. White stuff. It's like that's what I'm trying to tell you. The way they explain the narratives, even some of their own family members, like because they're just mad because they're just now being recognized. They were always the descendants of the slave woman, and that affects somebody. That does affect people, and a lot of people are still believing in that in our kind of Pan Africanism. So there's this remorsement, and it has a lot of these emotions involved, and that affects the narratives that are being told by them sometimes. And a lot of it is the parts of that conjecture you can't really prove, you know, you can't really prove. So, all right, let me see. So soon after their arrivals, they went back to Virginia, right? She gave birth to a child of whom Thomas Jefferson was the father. It lived but a short time. She gave birth to four others, and Jefferson was the father of all of them. Their names were Beverly, Harriet, Madison, myself, and Easton. Three sons and one daughter. We all became free agreeably to the treaty entered into by our parents before we were born. We all married and have raised families. Beverly left Monticello and went to Washington as a white man. Okay? Beverly, his brother, listen, he moved somewhere and he became a white man. He married a white woman in Maryland, and their only child, a daughter, was not known by the white folks to have any colored blood coursing in her veins. Beverly's wife family were people in good circumstance. Harriet married a white man in good standing in Washington City, whose name I could give but will not for prudential reasons. She raised a family of children, and so far as I know, they were never suspected of being tainted with African blood. So this is what they're saying, calling so-called black or people, anybody with a little melanation that's saying African blood. That's what I was saying. They said she was a full-blooded African. They mean she was full so-called black or just very dark skin. This is what I mean. So in the community where she lives or lives, I have not heard from her for 10 years and do not know whether she is dead or alive. She tied it to her interest on going to Washington to assume the role of a white woman, and by her dress and conduct as such, I am not aware that her identity as Harriet Hemings of Monticello has ever been discovered. So again, I told you half of his siblings went and became so-called white folks. Easton married a colored woman in Virginia and moved from there to Ohio and lived in Chillicothe several years. In the fall of 1852, he removed to Wisconsin, where he died a year or two afterwards. He left three children. As to myself, I was named Madison by the wife of James Madison, who was afterwards President of the United States. Mrs. Madison happened to be at Monticello at the time of my birth and begged the privilege of naming me, promising my mother to find a fine present for the honor. She consented, and Mrs. Madison dubbed me by the name I now acknowledge. But like many promises, oh, sorry, I lost my place. Somebody came. Of white folks to the slaves, she never gave my mother anything. I was born at my father's seat of Monticello in Albemarle County, Virginia, near Charlottesville, on the 19th day of January, 1805. My very earliest recollections are of my grandmother, Elizabeth Hemings. That was when I was about 3 years old, right? So we read that, the moment that she passed away. So then he talks about his dad and how he really showed him no affection. That he was always out doing his, president stuff and his countryman stuff, leading the revolution and all that. But he's saying he didn't really show affection to them. He only showed affection to the so-called white kids, not his Negro kids. All right, guys. So if you guys are interested, again, very good books. So again, this is the Hemingses of Monticello, one of them, and Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, An American Controversy. Again, same author. Still goes with the whole African narrative. So, you gotta dodge a lot of hijack. So, but it's up to you. So Elizabeth Hemings, again, was a slave or mixed ethnicity. With her owner, planter John Wells, she had 6 children, including Sally Hemings. These children were three-quarters white. Three-quarters white, huh? And following the condition of their mother, they were considered slaves from birth. They were half siblings of Wells' daughter, Martha Jefferson. All right, you guys trying to get the story, right? According to the oral history of her descendants, Betty was the daughter of a white captain of an English trading vessel and a full-blooded African mother, making Elizabeth a mulatto. And all right, so we know that many times mulatto don't mean that. We caught them lying, making that up. We're gonna see there's no proof of her being African. So they're just talking about her being dark complexion, guys, okay? In his memoir, Madison Hemings said that the captain's surname was Hemings. The family tradition was that he had tried to buy Betty when he discovered his daughter had been born. Again, that's according to. And the author we just read about, those books, Annette Gordon, speculated that Elizabeth's mother's name was Parthenia, based on the wills of Francis Epps, the Forbes, and John Wells, all right? Epps. Guys, I really think that what we're learning, right? We're meeting, getting to know Parthenia. Now we got a name. That didn't come up in any of the records, and and when it comes up in the genealogy, not a lot of records come up, just a lot of family trees put in the people's names and some colonial records stating marriage records and all that. A lot of people put in Susanna and this weird name Babayet as her name. Again, as you just read, and this is a historian, Annette Gordon Reed, who's also a fan. She's into the whole African thing. She didn't say that African name Babayet, and she never mentioned Susanna. She's saying it's Parthenia. So I added that, but that seems to be her mom, and it does make sense when we learn about the children, right? The children of Thomas Jefferson with Sally. Let me see if I see it here. Actually, it was Sally's siblings, Elizabeth's kids. Let me see right here. Thenia. There you go, Thenia. So Elizabeth, who would be the daughter of Parthenia, named one of her kids Thenia. You see that? So that kind of makes sense that Parthenia, out of all the people supposedly that this guy John Wells and this Francis Epps were moving around, trading, selling, or just keeping in the family, honestly, that's what I'm trying to explain to you guys. It seems, honestly, you guys are going to see why I say it, but it seems that she's an Epps. I think she's the daughter of this Francis Epps, the supposed African, right? Again, so she speculated that Parthenia is the name based on the wills of Francis Epps the Fourth and John Wells. The place of her birth is uncertain. Hemings said it was Williamsburg. Listen. So what do you mean Africa? This is what I'm trying to tell you guys. What do you mean Africa? First of all, they don't know. They can't really tell you. But Hemings said it was Williamsburg. That's Virginia. And I just realized I hadn't read this part. I hadn't read this, so I'm going to put Williamsburg. I just had Virginia, but I'm going to put Williamsburg, Virginia. I had England, honestly, because I'm going to show you why I had England. Where was this captain coming from? Because supposedly she was on the boat. So I'm like, okay, if she's on a boat, the only boat is coming from England. And then I found somebody named Susanna Hemings, who was a convict in one of these, convict transport ships. He was transporting convicts, guys. Remember the history we've done when it comes to the indentured servitude and the real middle passages. Okay. Yeah, that's what's up, Matt. That's what's up. So, but by 1756, Betty was recorded as a property of Francis Epps of the Bermuda Hundred Plantation. So that's what I'm saying, Betty. That again might be her grandfather. That's what I'm trying to say to you guys, because her mom Parthenia, what they're saying is the slave from Africa that this Hemings guy had, I believe. Okay, so Betty's grandson Madison Hemings related to family tradition. So that's what we read earlier. That Betty was born into slavery as the property of John Wales, meaning he owned her mother. The family said Captain Hemings plotted to kidnap his daughter, but Wales took measurements against it. Wales may have sold Betty to Francis Epps and later regained ownership of her when he married Epps' daughter, Martha, as his first wife. So again, now when it comes to Jefferson's wife, she has Epps in her family. Her mom is a Epps. Her mom is Martha. Or else Betty. So this is what I'm saying. So all these people are just they're being kept in the family. So after John Wales married Martha Epps, the daughter of Francis Epps, who I'm saying is possibly the owner or who had Parthenia as the concubine. Actually had Parthenia's mom, not Parthenia herself, but her mom, because they're saying she fathered. She's an Epps. I would say we don't know the name of Parthenia's mom from there. We don't know. She's supposed to be the African. But what I'm trying to say, guys, and you're gonna see, is that I believe this one of these Epps had a servant, had Parthenia, who they call in the African. So she's an Epps. You see a picture of her, it says born Epps. She was born in an Epps. So I believe one of these Epps is the dad. Again, so Martha, one of his daughters, Martha Epps, related to that original Parthenia, who supposedly started the slave line, right? And then Betty mixed with Wales, come on, and then had Sally, and then Sally mixed with, look at all the mixing that's going on. So how so-called black are these people? And again, remember, we're not saying that all these Europeans are so-called white either, but you just gotta have a lot of context to what they teach us in school. Again, Martha Skelton Jefferson was the wife of Thomas Jefferson until she was served as the First Lady of Virginia during Jefferson's term as governor from 1779 to 1781. Of the 6 children born to Thomas and Martha, only 2 survived adulthood, Martha and Mary. Martha died 4 months after the birth of her last child. The couple's letters to one another were burned, though by whom is unknown, and Thomas rarely spoke of her, so she remained a somewhat enigmatic figure. So it is widely held that as a widower, Thomas had a long-standing relationship and children with Martha's half-sister, Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman who was 3/4 white by descent. She was actually, I don't know if I'll be able to read it. I read so much going into this, but she was described, Sally, as very bright mulatto, like very light skinned. Like a lot of the Hemings are very light skinned. That doesn't mean the light skin came necessarily, just from it's just people being light skinned. There was light skinned Europeans that were so-called black, but they were light skinned. They were coming too. So, because Martha Wales was born, okay, to Martha Epps Wales. So Martha's mother, Martha Epps Wales, appears to have given birth to twins, but neither survived. The girl was stillborn, and the boy died after his birth. Martha was nicknamed Patsy. Martha's father, John, was a Lancaster-born immigrant to the 13 colonies. He worked as an attorney, purpose panther, and slave trader. In addition, he was an agent for the Farrell and Jones Company, based in Bristol, undertaking activities such as the debt collection of their own behalf. Okay. Let's see. On January 1760, January 26, Wells married his third wife, Elizabeth Lomas Skelton. She was the widow of Reuben Skelton and older brother Buster Skelton, his daughter Martha's first husband. Without producing a child with Wells, she died on February 10, 1761. John Wells then took Betty Hemings as a mistress. Again, the daughter, right, of Parthenia, and gave Martha additional. So, yeah. So again, the daughter of Captain Hemings and Parthenia, right? Why I say Parthenia is an Epps, half from Epps and half probably a servant he had. That's why he didn't claim her and he was selling her like property, just like, but they were giving it to other family members, guys. It's not like they just giving it to anybody. So John Wells then took Betty Hemings as a mistress and gave Martha additional half siblings. Martha likely received her education, including literature, dance, music, French language, and Bible study, from private tutors or women in the family. She became the lady of the house after her second stepmom died when she was 13 years of age. All right, so the history is there. I just wanted to show kind of like what the mainstream. Now, looking at this, why is Betsy Hemings' grave in the Epps family cemetery? So this is what I'm saying. And it comes out, he's letting you know, because they were family. Betsy Hemings was a product of Entwined black and white plantation families. Her grandmother, Betty Hemings, was owned by Francis Epps, paternal great-grandfather of John Wells Epps, and maternal grandfather of Thomas Jefferson's wife, Martha. And again, I believe he fathered Parthenia. Him or Francis Epps, there's a bunch of them. There's the third, the second, the fifth, there's a bunch of them. One of these Francis Epps, I believe, is the father of Parthenia. He was born in Epps. As part of the dowry, Betty Hemings became the property of John Wells, father of Martha Jefferson, and John Wells Epps' mother, Elizabeth. After John Wells' third and last wife died, Betty Hemings became his mistress. Upon her father's death, Martha Jefferson inherited the entire Hemings family, literally her brothers and sisters. She brought to Monticello, but prevailing law dictated that they become the property of her husband, Thomas Jefferson. So by default, he got them. The newly arrived Hemings family rapidly assumed the key household positions at Monticello. Alright, guys, I don't know if the music's too loud, sorry. Just realized. But prevailing law dictated they become. Okay, so we read that. And one explanation of their accent is that Martha Jefferson and Betty Hemings had a close relationship. Okay? Close relationship. They're sisters. You understand? And then her daughter Martha, who also was named Martha, who married. This is what I'm saying, guys. Aunts, nieces, cousins, not slave and master. The way they tell us the narratives is what's wrong. And we just got to correct them. And you got to understand, some people did treat these people like family members. Maybe not on paper and stuff. Maybe on paper, that's how they had to do it by law. But not, it wasn't always about evil white slave master beating on a African slave. That's not always the case. Mistreating or whipping and again, a lot of those things, that was just evil people. That included black slave owners doing that to other black folks that they own, Indians, black Europeans, everybody. It wasn't about color. And people are good and bad whether they're white or black. The complexion doesn't determine that. So, I'm reading that. Again, she's buried. They're even buried. These people are buried in their family. That's their family. The majority of those intertwined for the Getting Word project trace their ancestry. Elizabeth Hemings, her descendants occupied a special role at Monticello, serving in important positions with the household and on the mountaintop. They were enslaved cooks, butlers, seamstresses, weavers, carpenters, blacksmiths, gardeners, and musicians. Jefferson freed or allowed to go free 3 of Elizabeth Hemings. Okay, so we read that, right? So the daughter of an enslaved woman and an English sea captain. So now she's not an African, she's just an enslaved woman. An English sea captain Hemings. Elizabeth Hemings was brought to Monticello with her children after 1773 death of her owner John Wells, Jefferson's father-in-law. According to her grandson Madison Hemings, 6 of her children were fathered by Wells, Robert James Sr. So not just her master, but her ex, partner. All right, and here's a picture of some of the descendants. You see, mixed. and some of the stories. And these are really interesting stories. Uh, Let me see if I can get this one, just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. There's a rumor in the family. Jill Sim. All right, let's see. Oh, it won't work. I think. I think it won't work because I'm streaming, because I'm sharing screen. But she's just saying, yeah, we didn't know it was a secret. We kind of heard there was rumors and all this. I didn't even know about Sally. Now they know that they descend from so-called African Americans, as she says, guys. Yeah, her. She descends from a so-called African American. So-called, right? Now, look what it says here for Parthenia. This is what they're calling. This is a listing for Parthenia. Look, guys. First they're calling her Susanna. I don't know why. Then they're calling her an African woman, also known as Bayabi, Susanna Epps. Oh, Epps. Oh, so she's an Epps, huh? She was born in Kenya, huh? But she's an Epps. She's the daughter of Francis Epps the fifth. Also, it's the fifth they're saying, and Judith Eldridge, huh? Really? And but she's born in Kenya, but that's the daughter of, huh? Partner Captain John Hemings, right? Mother of Elizabeth Hemings, huh? This is what I'm telling you guys. They can do whatever they want, and they just be making up stuff. They just be making up stuff. So we're gonna take a look at this documentary soon. All right. As part of her dowry, Martha's mother brought with her a personal slave, Susanna. Now remember, the researcher of both these books, who actually did very good research. I didn't really find Parthenia, but she actually found a will naming it the 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 slave women he was given, and there was only two women. One of them was Parthenia, right? And then it seems like the other one didn't have children or something, and that's why and then it's only this one. And then now we see that Elizabeth named one of her kids Thenia, so kind of remembering the name. So again, I don't know where they're getting the Susanna from, who had an 11-year-old daughter by the name of Elizabeth Hemings. Betty, John and Martha's marriage contract provided that Susanna and Betty were to remain the property of Martha Epps because they're family. Remember Susanna Epps, right? Susanna Epps, right? Born daughter of Francis Epps, right? So make sure she remains the property of Martha, her sister, and her heirs forever. So she was the property of John Wells, a Welshman. It says here, 18th century members of Madison Hemings DNA might be connected to the House of People. The House of People, really, DNA test. Oh, they put him because he did a DNA test. Now they're trying to say, oh, maybe he's Hausa, Guinea, Africa. Hausa are not even from Africa. Dodge the hijack. The Hausa from Persia. Persia, right? Is that what it was? Or was it India? I forget. I got the video, guys. You guys know what I'm talking about. All right, so this listing has no sources, calling her an African, not even her name. Not sure why. Not sure why they doing that, guys. Not sure why. All right, real quick, guys. So, where do I start? Where do I start? So Julia. So this is Easton. Okay, so these are the kids, right? We got Thomas Jefferson and Martha Patty Wales, right? Coming from the Epps and Wales side, right? And then we got Sarah Haley Hemings, who's her half sister. They got the same dad. Same dad, right? So there's some stories on Sally. Let's just go into this real quick. So, real person, Sally Hemings, 73, died 1835. All right, let's go to her gallery. She should have some stories here, made up stories. Let's see. All right, so yeah, this, I don't know why even this is even here. So this is a drawing supposedly of her. Supposedly, I don't know where that came from, but if it is, very pretty, and it does show a little light complexion. Says here the life of Sally Hemings, daughter, mother, sister, aunt, inherited as property. Really, seamstress, world traveler, and slave, but she was the sister as well. Sally Hemings is one of the most famous and least known African American women in U.S. history. For more than 200 years, her name has been linked to Thomas Jefferson as his concubine. All right, so that's just a paper written there. And they have a little article here that somebody typed up. Time in Paris. Look at that, real records. My best regards to Sally. So her writing. All right. So this is an obituary of her right here. And yeah, telling you this is supposed to be a portrait of her when cameras weren't even invented back then, you know? So I don't know where they getting this portrait from. And okay, and that's about it, I guess. Okay, so they had children, right? The guy we were listening to is this guy, James Madison Hemings, who talked about, and I'm gonna show you again. He was called listed as colored or so-called black, right? Free colored person, free colored. He ended up in Ohio, mulatto here, mulatto, Huntington Ross, Ohio, where he ended up. Okay, and then his children. Let me just show you one example. Uh, right, 1900 census. His son is 51. He's so-called black, right? Father's from Virginia, James Hemings. So we go back. I just wanted to show you, because, literally, you go down. I think even if you go down Easton, who married a colored woman, eventually he married also into white society, and his kids eventually passed as white. Let me see if I can. John Jefferson Hemings. So look, this is a picture supposedly of them. I don't know if this is correct. So this would be one of the eldest, Beverly. Let me see. So this is one of his kids. Let me show. All right, 1870, John Jefferson. Look, raised black. This is funny. So look, John Jefferson, so-called black, 1870. All right. So that's a hint I just got. I hadn't even added that. He ended up in Wisconsin. Look, now he's white. So 1900, 30 years later, same guy is white. In Tennessee or Virginia. In Tennessee, he was black. By the time he got to Wisconsin, guys, he was so-called white. All right. This has really happened. This is what I'm saying. This stuff really, really happened. Beverly. Okay. So that picture we just saw was Beverly as the older man and his sons. All right, but Beverly right here passing as mulatto. That so-called picture I showed you of a so-called white family, he's being listed as mulatto here. All right. Let me see. If the picture comes up again. See what I'm saying? This is what they're calling mulatto. He's calling him mulatto. That's Beverly. Okay. So he literally might be mulatto. And that's the picture again. So that's him and his children. So again, they went on to pass as white and live in white society and marry white women and got a lot more so-called whiter. All right. Crayon color terms here. All right. So I just wanted to show you guys that. All right. So it's as easy as going down one line and you're black folks, and then the other line, and these are brothers, right? Coming from the same parents, and half of them became white, half of them so-called black. All right. Now, remember they were telling us Sally Hemings, they're saying John Wells, right? Fathered her through Elizabeth. Remember that. So is she like full head on slave? That's that's how do I explain this so you guys can okay. So again, Thomas Jefferson married her sister. All right. So that was his sister-in-law. He inherited her from John Wells. That was her father-in-law. But that's her dad through Elizabeth Hemings, right? Okay. John Wales, and then his parents go into Edward Wales from Lancaster, England, and then up in Virginia. In case you're curious, Margaret Waller from England. And it keeps going from there. I didn't, as you guys can see, I can keep going. I'm going to show you guys something interesting. You know, that a lot of these lines, we're going to probably have future videos on all this, who they are connected to when it comes to royalty and in Europe, right? So all these people, a lot of these lines, I'm gonna start showing you. Now, going into Elizabeth, remember, she's supposed to be his servant, who was the daughter of Captain John Hemings, right? A so-called white man. So how much fully so-called black is she? And then the African slave, supposedly, right? That, really was not proved. That's not proven. So, all right. 1790, Elizabeth, free colored will, North Carolina. Let me see the gallery. I go through so many documents, guys, when I'm doing this. And I forget what person they're usually attached to. They're usually attached to one person. So let's go up real quick. So John Hemings, I mean, I didn't keep going. He's in England, right? Remember, he was a sea captain, and then his parents are right here. He's a junior, John Hemings and Mary Searle. They're in England. Now, Parthenia, she's got 10 hands. I got a lot of hands for her, but they're like these are from England, so I don't think that's her. That's a Susanna Hemings, and that's what I'm saying. Who's Susanna Hemings? Who's Susanna? Where are they getting Susanna from? But here's a Susanna as Epps, Charles City. This might be her. Not sure if she renamed herself Susanna. Anyways, what do I have? That's facts here. Let me see. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you, and I attached this. I did find somebody coming in from foreign, and this is a specifically Susanna Hemings. She arrived at Potomac from England, 1731, complete book of in bondage. So she was a convict, so-called supposed convict. This Susanna Hemings, I don't know if this is the same person. Who's Susanna? But I'm just showing you that if this person is literally, if there is a Susanna Hemings in this time period, and I got these as hints, who's coming from anywhere foreign, it would be this one right here, coming from England, not Africa. And this is her grave, of course. When you're dealing with graves, you're dealing with what people put, not what's true. You can put on somebody's tombstone or whatever information you want there. Who knows how, when they redid this grave, now they put she was born. Now this is what they're calling her. This is what I'm saying, you guys. Baya Baya Epps. Why are they calling her Baya Baya? Where's Parthenia? Children Elizabeth Hemings. So that's the mom, right? Who had a daughter with a sea captain, right? Remember that Hemings. Remember Hemings himself said she was born in Williamsburg. Hemings himself. We just read that. We're talking about real sources. Okay, now look at the picture. Let me see if I can. I can't even zoom in. Now you guys see that? You see how well dressed she is? You see about how well dressed she is, right? It says Baya Baya Hemings, born Epps. Look, born Epps, not born Baya Baya Baya. She was born in Epps. Do you guys see that, right? Who put that there? Whoever typed that in knows who her parents are. Knows she's not from Africa. And look how well dressed she is. Was she ever really a slave? Or is this after she was freed, after her indenture was over? After her indenture was over. But she was born in Epps. That's what I was trying to tell you guys. And that's what literally came up as hints. Now let me show you, right? What it's saying here. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Bayabe was a woman who was taken from her country, possibly Nigeria. All right, so you just told us Kenya somewhere else, right? They just told us Kenya, right? Now it's Nigeria. Around 1734, she was raped while on a slave ship to Virginia by the ship's captain. Dodge the hijack. Do you guys hear that? I hope you guys are listening to me. Like, I know it's not a lot of you because, it's members only video right now. But I hope you guys are listening to the hijacks they tell us. This is what Pan Africans and these Black Lives Matter stuff groups be pushing. They'll read this and be like, look, she was raped on her way from Africa to Virginia by John. John Hemings never went to Africa. His ship sailed, we read earlier, his ship sailed from England to Virginia, Williamsburg. That was his route back and forth. He was a merchant between those two places. They're making this up, guys. And then she was impregnated by Captain Hemings. He himself said she was born in Virginia and gave birth to the daughter, Elizabeth Betty Hemings. Baya Baya was bought by Francis Epps. Oh, really? And was renamed Parthenia. Or is that her real name? Renamed, huh? Who says it was Baya Baya? Like, where's all these sources? In 1746, her daughter Betty were given, her and her daughter, not just alone, her and her daughter were given as a wedding present to Martha Epps. Again, most likely her sister. That's the normal thing they've been doing, right? Just like they gave Sally to her sister, they gave Elizabeth to her sister. Most likely they gave Parthenia to her sister. Hope you guys are catching on, man. I know this is not easy to explain, guys, because it's like you got to go. If they can conjecture, why can't we conjecture correctly and with when we're looking at sources logically? This is what they were doing literally, and I'm gonna try and this. I'm gonna say something as I go, guys. I'm gonna show you a record. It starts looking like, you know how the royals treated the second borns, their illegitimate kids? This is literally how they're treating these people. Not like slaves, but like they're illegitimate kids. They still give them privileges. They're still making sure they're all right. They're still growing up with them. They're still making sure they get free. They're still making they're not the firstborns. Get it? Like, this is what I'm trying to relate it to. This is literally how they were treating people. This is what they brought from Europe. That type of culture of their servants, mating with their servants, giving them as their illegitimate, their mistresses. Who were these mistresses in Europe? This is literally the house servants as well. It's the same thing. These royals were having babies with their servants. They call them mistresses. We don't even understand who was this. How did he get it? Because she worked in their house. She worked for the royal. She was the cook for the royal. She was this and the same thing. Same thing, guys. All right. Okay. We're gonna keep going. I get passionate about this because I just like so much bull I be reading and how they be trying to turn people into so-called Africans. There's no proof of her even being called Baba Bay. When you go read these books, and she believes still in the West African trade, but she's not making things up. She does conjecture a lot based on what they was told to her about black folks and their only origin being supposedly West African slaves. So she goes with that history to try to explain what she's learning in the records and stuff, right? But she's not just making up things saying she was called Baba. She didn't say none of that. She never mentioned Susanna. She literally says that she believes it's Parthenia. She literally says that when you go read these books. Parthenia, look, the Hemingses of Monticello. Go read these books, guys. If you're, very into, like, it'll tell you. It'll tell you. She believes it's Parthenia, and she literally says nothing is known about her origin. It is, literally she's saying, I don't know, and historians don't know. So why do people saying she's coming from Africa? You guys are going to see some people put her in South Africa, some people put her in Ghana, and others put her in Kenya, others in Nigeria. It's all over the place. And they got no slave ship. No slave ship. No slave ship. So what came up in the hints when it comes to ancestry family hints? This is what most people had. They had Thomas Epps. Look at that. And Epps, I think it's Francis Epps. Thomas Epps. Right here's blank. I think is they put in what they're trying to put is Thomas Eldridge, because when I went to all these people's profiles, they didn't have no Thomas Epps. They have Thomas Eldridge. I think that was Judith Cannon's second husband, Thomas Eldridge. That's why he became the father. But I believe One of the F's, Francis, I believe, the main people, all right, the main people, they fathered Parthenia. Again, the picture, let's go to the gallery. The picture is literally telling us born Epps, born Epps. Now look at this. This is stuff you find on Answer. This look, they got this from Wikipedia. So as part of her dowry, Martha's mother brought with her personal slave Susanna, who had an 11-year-old daughter by the name of Elizabeth Hemings. Betty, John, and Martha's marriage contract provided Susanna and Betty were to remain private. All right, so where are they getting Susanna from? Again, where are they getting Susanna? Now they add the Husa, Nigeria stuff, DNA. What DNA? Show me the genealogy. Show me that. Show me that. What do you mean DNA? All right, show me there. It should be easy. So look, they copied this from where? Find a grave, what we just read. That she was taken from Nigeria and she was raped on the ship. They made that up. They made that up. Made that up. Literally. Literally. The picture again says born Epps. Born Epps. We saw a very clear one, right? Born Epps. There you go. Baya Hemings, born Epps. You guys see that, right? Born Epps. As you can see, born Epps. Born Epps. She's an Epps. Somebody knows. And that's what she was given to Martha Epps, the mother-in-law of Thomas Jefferson. That's what she was given to her. That's her sister. That's her sister. Just like Elizabeth was given to Martha Epps Jr., Thomas Jefferson's wife. And just like Sally and eventually were given to her sister. It's the same thing. Okay? And you're going to see history's going to, time will tell, guys. Time is going to prove this. Doesn't matter what you think, I think. They can't prove no African. They have no slave. There is no, that's no slave ships came directly into like from West Africa into places like this. There is no history of that. So yeah, it goes on to the Epps, but now let me show you something. I found something really, really interesting. Before I continue, right? Before I continue, I'm not done, guys. This is an extensive tree I found. All right, so Thomas and Judith supposedly. I think Judith might be her mom. And I think she was with the Francis guy, maybe. But maybe not. Or they inherited. But Parthenia was born in Epps. Francis Epps and John and the Waynes were in business dealing with her. He even owned her, Francis Epps, supposedly. All right. He was born in Epps. Let me go back. Now, where did you go? Okay. I didn't even know I had a duplicate here. Hold on, I got a duplicate here. All right, this is how you merge duplicates, guys, in case you didn't know. Monticello, yeah. All right. Now, I'm going to show you something interesting. Hold up. We ain't done. We ain't done. So when it comes to Thomas Jefferson, right? Now, he's the son of Peter Jefferson, or Colonel Peanut Jefferson, and Jane Isham Randolph. Now, I'm going to read to you something very interesting. I haven't been able to prove the mom part, but this is what, let me just show you what this book is saying about Thomas Jefferson. Well, The Eagle Screams. I think this was a newspaper. The Eagle Screams, right? This is written in 1936, but they're going to quote something that's a lot older and during possibly the time of Thomas Jefferson's life. All right, The Eagle Screams by Coley Banks Taylor. And let me just zoom in real quick. They ganged up on Jefferson. they began they began early to assassinate the character of this great American, and they never stopped. True, he was the author of Declaration of Independence at 33 and governor of Virginia during the worst of the war. He gave America the dollar to replace the awkward shilling and pound system. He negotiated treaties with foreign countries. Next to Benjamin Franklin, he was the most popular minister to France we ever had. It all made no difference to his enemies. He was called a villain and a rascal and an illegitimate son of a slave and an Indian. He was Long Tom. They said busily at work tearing down the Constitution. A son of a slave and an Indian, huh? Hey, man, this is what they're saying right here. I don't know why. And then, let me see. That other page has the same. What we're about to read in another source. This is the Johnny Cake Papers of Shepherd Tom, together with reminiscences of Narragansett School of former days, 1915. But again, they're gonna quote something else. All right. So here, on page 233. Whoops. They're saying, regarding John Adams, the profound and fearless patriot and full-blooded Yankee, exceeded in every possible respect his competitor, Tom Jefferson, for the presidency, who, to make the best of him, was nothing but a mean-spirited, low-lived fellow, the son of a half-breed Indian squaw, sired by a Virginia mulatto father. A Virginia mulatto father, as was well known in the neighborhood where he was raised, wholly on the hoe cake, made of coarse ground southern corn, bacon, and hominy, with an occasional change of fricasseed bullfrog, for which abominable reptiles he had acquired a taste during his residence among the French in Paris, to whom there could be no question he would sell his country at the first offer made to him cash down. So they're kind of talking shit now. You guys see what they're saying, though, right? Both those sources. Those are the only two sources that kind of mention anything but possibly about Jefferson being so-called black or not fully white. This comes out in that book, The Six Negro Presidents, and he doesn't really show the source; he just types it in. I got this is the actual source. This is now listen what the this is what the New York Times says, because they try to say no, that was much later. They didn't know. They try to say that was way later, 18. That was 100 years after. This is what they try to say about that. Now, New York Times, it says, why the candidates are targets for mudslingers. When was this written? This is back in 1964, September 27th. So you tell me if the New York Times is lying or they report incorrect information. You guys tell me. All right? You guys tell me. Where is it? All right. Let's see. Hold on. Let me get. Okay, here we go. Now it says here, perhaps the most of all encompassing one sentence denunciation in American political history was an attack on Thomas Jefferson in the campaign of 1796. The New York Times said this happened in 1796. Other historians will tell you that this phrase was taken from somebody who said that in 1890, like 100 years later. The New York Times telling you this happened during his campaign. Jefferson, to make the best of him, is nothing but a mean-spirited, low-lived fellow, son of a half-breed Indian squaw, sired by Virginia mulatto father, raised wholly on hoe cake made of coarse ground southern corn, bacon, and and so on. Right? 1796. That's when the New York Times says that happened. Now, when it came to so his dad, they're saying his dad might be mulatto. You guys already know what I think about when I see these drawings that all look like George Washington and they got the little curls and the little froze. You already know what I think I think they whitewashing a little bit. They're not really telling you that these people possibly might be a little ethnic, right? Now, her being an Indian squaw, I didn't find that. Like, I don't, I mean, she comes from very prominent people. Now, I don't know if possibly, let me see, on the Rogers side, no, she's London. They're in London. They coming from London. Now, I don't know if whether her dad had a relationship with a servant and an Indian servant, and maybe that's not her real mom. That's just the official mom. That's why somebody knew she was a half Indian, half breed, his mom. But I don't see that, right? When it comes to his dad, yeah, he can be definitely black or mulatto. That I don't argue. I believe a lot of this is whitewashed. A lot, I believe a lot of these are just drawings. I believe a lot of these people, especially her dad. Look at her dad. This is what I'm saying. When it comes with these wigs, you guys already know what I think when I see these wigs, and that's look at that, the curl, the furry curl, the woolly curls, the woolly hair. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it could be possible. I was gonna make a video alone, just reading those two sources just to create a hype, but I don't like doing that, guys. I want to prove this. I want to prove that. I want to find the Indian, and that would be ill. Unfortunately, I didn't find on the one who says is his mom. Now the other thing could be that Peter Jefferson have a servant Indian and had Jefferson as a half breed. We're saying illegitimate. This is what I'm saying. Is Thomas Jefferson an illegitimate? Did he have another? Now, he did come up, as you guys can see, Mary Ann Hunt, Mary Frances Robertson. He did have other women. Could they be talking possibly about them being somewhere Indian, and they're just saying, "Oh, I come from her because it's more prominent." I don't know. It's hard. Records say that that's the son of. History says that's the son. He's the son of Jane Isham. I don't see no Indian there, so that's why I don't think those sources are like, unless they telling the truth and just this has been hidden, right? When it comes to the Jeffersons, I found something weird when it comes to his mom, talking about his grandma, Thomas Jefferson, Virginia Field or Mary Field. See if I can find it. Let's just see if I can find it. Uh-huh. Da, 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 da. Let me see. I was like, why did they put that? Why did they write that right there? Why does it have to do? All right, let's see. Not right here. That's not it. It might be in the hints. Let me see. Let me just add this real quick, see if it pops up what I saw. Okay. I mean, look where they are. They got married in Chickahominy Parish, Virginia. All right, Judith Sunfield. Okay. Eh, So I'm just adding this to the tree, this family tree. So I don't see it though, unfortunately. What I saw earlier was when it came to Virginia, it says she was the servant of that guy. She was the servant of this Jefferson, and she was so-called black. That's what literally it said. That's what literally it said, that she was a servant and so-called black. I'm like, why are they putting that there in the description? Like that would make him so-called mulatto, the son, right? If there she's black, supposedly white, right? That's not saying that these people are white. So there's a lot of conjecture and stuff. I don't see it. Could they be? Is there more to the people's names and the stories? We're missing a lot of background. Now, when it comes to her parents, seems that that's her parents. She was born in Henrico County, Virginia, but then it seems that his dad might be coming from Europe. That's what they're saying here. I haven't added that. Is the mom the Indian? You know, so still got a lot. I don't add things just to add. I've been working on this for a couple of days. I want to just go live with it. I got a lot more trees to do and videos to do in genealogy. Okay. So that was on the Jefferson side again, the Randolphs, very prominent family. You see the wigs. I don't these pictures to me, they don't, you know. Okay, there was something about Mary Isham. Now I remember. Okay, so Mary Isham. Let me see. Mary Royal Isham. There's something about the Ishams. Let me see if I. Okay, yeah, this image right here. I just want to show you guys. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in as much as I can. What's going on with the music? So I found this great book, which I'm gonna be reading. It's not like they don't have a PDF form. I have to read it online. I found the actual whole book, not just like images like this. But according to a genealogy that they've done, uh, this is one of the ancestors of Thomas Jefferson, which was William the First, the Lion, King of Scotland, and then it shows you how, and it goes like just like this. You see, so from the illegitimate daughter of Richard of Vena. So he got with her, and then this illegitimate daughter, Isabel Scotland, got with Robert de Ross, right? And then Sir William de Ross, who's their kid, got with Fitzpiers. Then their kid, Sir Robert de Ross, got with, and you guys see so on and so on, right? So on, so on. They're telling you, and it goes down, right? And then eventually gets to William Isham. You guys see, right? Sir Useby Isham and William Isham is their son. Mary Brett on the other side. Then eventually you get to Henry Isham, who is the dad of this lady we're seeing right now, Mary Isham, who married the Randolph. That's where the Randolph comes into the line. The parents of Isham Randolph, who is the dad of Jane Randolph, who is the mother of Thomas Jefferson, supposedly, right? So I just wanted to show you guys that there's another king he's related to. Sorry. But what I wanted to show you again, it's like this is a perfect example. These are unofficial royals because it's from the illegitimate daughter of Richard of Vena. Okay? So they did this a lot, but they kept their illegitimate kids around. They gave them positions of high positions. They still made sure. This is a lot of the aristocracy in the plantations in America were doing the same exact thing with their so-called servants and slaves. All right? All right. Hold on, go back. And then, so what did I realize? Okay, hold on. I didn't even go all the way. Sorry, guys. I didn't even go all the way. Let me go back to that image. Okay, so continuing on that, right? You got Mary Jefferson, who's the sister of Thomas, right? She married John Boylan, who's a great grandson of Pocahontas and John Rolfe. You can verify that. I did verify that. And then you got Anne Isham. So the lady we're looking at right now, her sister's named Anne Isham. She married Francis Epps III. Guys, this is big. This is what I'm trying to say. I know it's confused. I'm going here. I'm saying a lot of things. Remember I was saying about Parthenia, Susanna, the so-called African. Remember I was saying one of the Epps is her dad. I believe that one of those Epps is her dad. Well, happens to be that these Epps are related to Thomas too, not just his wife. They're related to Thomas Jefferson through the Ishams, through his mom. So not only could Susanna, Elizabeth, or Betty and Sally are given to the moms and the Ebb side, they're also being given to Thomas because they're family. They knew all this stuff, guys. They knew the relationships of these people. They kept track of who's legitimate and who's illegitimate. Here you go. I'm gonna show you again. Anne Isham, sister of Mary, married Francis Ebb III. They had Francis IV, who's Sarah, married Sarah, and they had Martha Epps, who married John Wales. Remember, Martha Epps is Elizabeth's sister. Elizabeth Betty's sister, right? Who John Wales had a baby with. Literally the same situation. Thomas had a baby with her daughter, who was Sally's sister. Same situation, guys. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Most likely is the same case with Susanna or Parthenia Epps. I believe is one of the Epps daughters, right? And this is being passed down together. So Thomas Jefferson is related to his wife. Thomas Jefferson is related to his wife. They're very far distant cousins, very far, a lot of times removed, but they are family. It's all being kept in the family. We know that about these prominent people throughout history, nothing new, right? But it's crazy that I'm telling you, she's an Epps, right? She's an Epps. Susanna was born in Epps. The first so-called African in the family, supposedly, right? Where the so-called black is coming from, supposedly, right? She's an Epps, and now I know the Epps are related to Jefferson too. They're family. It's all family. All right, so I'm glad I found this and remembered to show this. That explains a lot more why I'm saying all this stuff. And the way they're used to that. That's the kind of culture they come from. They're used to having illegitimate and legitimate kids and passing them around and having them, yeah, can Game of Thrones, stuff like that, you know? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. All right. So hold on. Mary Royal Isham. So guys, you know, I had to verify. I was like, all right, let me find. I found Anne Isham, right? And I did find her married to the Epps, right? And then you go down. They had Colonel Francis Epps the Fourth, right? Again, married Sarah, and then you got Keenan. She's a Keenan too, guys. And then the Keenan is a possible mother of Sarah of Parthenia. That's what I was showing you earlier. These people, you know, why not produce your own servants? Think about it. Think about it. They were doing that, guys. Look, Francis Epps, that would be the fifth, right? And then, look, that's Martha Epps' brother, right? Martha Epps, and then again, John Wales. So we came a different way. John Wales and then Martha Epps is the mom of the other Martha Epps, Martha Patty Wales, who's the sister Sally, and we're back in the tree. Now I'm gonna show you something else, guys. Remember the guy who's telling the story, right? James Madison, right? Remember he went and passed as black, right? I really hope I'm remembering everything. You know, I just want to show you guys, but it's a lot of info I go through. That's why I kind of like pre-recording things. So he married a lady named Mary McCoy. Now, in the book we were reading earlier, where he's telling his story, what we were reading, he actually mentions, yeah, eventually I married Mary McCoy, and then he says her grandma was a slave in the house of blah blah, and she was literally the same thing, the daughter of the plantation owner and maybe a servant. It's literally the same story, guys. Right? So I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me see if I can, because they were trying to say she was the African too, her grandma, the McCoy, on the McCoy side, right? Remember, James Madison is the illegitimate son of President Thomas Jefferson through his girl, his second lover, his concubine, Sarah Hemings. All right, and that's proven through DNA. It's been proven, guys. This is not a contest, it's been proven. So he says he married Mary McCoy. Remember, she's passing as black as well, you know. They black folks, they passing as black. Let me just show you. Mary Hemings, mulatto, or mulatto right here, right? Madison Hemings, right? 1870. Look, this is the other, now look, in 1870, they both passed as white. Huntington, that's them. Mary and Madison Hemings. Now they're passing as white, guys. Let me see if it's all the family passing as white. Oh, and they actually made them, they did it apart on purpose. They're not white. Look, it says M. See that? It says M, mulatto. So they're still mulatto in 1870. They're mulatto in 1860. Mulatto in 1850. Right? Mary McCoy. his wife and him. All right. I'm gonna show you something amazing about her ancestry, guys. She's related. She's related to Chris Brown. She's related to Chris Brown. I'm gonna show you on what line. I'm gonna show you on what line she's related to Chris Brown. Right. So, Jonathan McCoy and Elizabeth Hughes. On the McCoy, I didn't really get far. I got Jonathan Carter McCoy. You know, hey, possibly Black Irish, possibly, guys. Hey, or Scottish. Is that Scottish or Irish? I'm not sure. Um, let's just look it up real quick. Okay, Ireland, alternate Ireland, Scotland. Yeah, so the ancient kingdom of Des Moines, Desmond, looking at Southwest Corn. So mostly Irish first, right? Ancient kingdom, ancient, ancient. Remember what we learned in the book Ancient and Modern Britons about these areas and these people. Ancient. And that's the dad. I didn't get much. There's not really much. On the mom side, Elizabeth Hughes, she's a Hughes. And again, I got records for this and gallery stories, and I looked it up. I looked up the history, guys. It's legit. I looked it up. Her dad is Stephen Hughes, and mom is Cheney or Chana. Remember, he said that her grandma was an African slave. James, who also said that his grandma was an like, this is what he believed. This is what he was told, passed down. He says this was what passed down to me. This was what passed down to many black folks, and it was incorrect. Now, when it comes to China, let me just show you. Let me just show you what they saying. Chauncey, right? Mulatto Hughes, mulatto. What did mulatto mean? She's half white. So what do you mean she's from Africa? Anyways. Okay. Birthplace, right? China. Okay, you don't see anything, right? And nothing here saying Africa. All right, why are you saying Africa, Kurimeo? All right, well, I'll show you. It's like, let me see if I can find it. There we go. So somebody, now, okay, so first of all, let's go to the gravesite. You guys see the gravesite says Chana with a C? Somebody couldn't read it or purposely couldn't read it. There you go. Born in Africa. Look, this is what I'm trying to tell you. Look, slave Chana or Ghana. Where are they getting Ghana from? Born in Africa. Had children with Stephen Hughes. Oh, so again, the master having children with supposed slave, right, from Africa. Listen what this is what it says. After marrying twice, it is reported that Stephen Hughes had a child or children with his slave mistress Chana Ghana. This is a sad situation, and although this kind of thing was common occurring those times, it was not right. Oh, see, this is what I'm saying. Like, definitely is not right. Anybody being forced, especially if they're serving it. But that's just the way they tell the stories. Like, oh, poor is an African slave. She's not from Africa, guys. I'm gonna show you where they got that from. This is where they got that from. This guy put Ghana. See where they typed this up? The Barnett Cemetery. They got the picture. It says Chana with a C, not Ghana. That was her name. That's not the country. Why would they put the country in the tombstone? This is what I'm saying, guys. And sometimes we lose logic when we're listening to these Pan-Africans, all these false African, Pan-African studies historians. They dumb us down, and we allow them to dumb us down. So he put Ghana, and that's where they're getting Ghana from. Nothing to do with Ghana. She was born in Virginia. It says in 1834, I married Mary McCoy. This is Stephen, okay. Her grandmother was a slave. This is what he was saying. And lived with her master, Stephen Hughes. Lived with her master. That's his wife. It became his wife. Near Charlottesville. As his wife. A slave that lived as his master, as his wife. Why are you saying what? It's just, see how they just narrating this story, just trying to make you think, oh yeah, she's just a slave. She was manumitted by him, which made their children freeborn. Mary McCoy's mother was his daughter. I was about 28 and she was 28, 2 years of age when we married. We lived and labored together in Virginia till 1836. Then we voluntarily left and came to Ohio. We settled in Pebble Township, Pike County. We lived there 4 or 5 years, and during my stay in the county, I worked at my trade on and off for about 4 years. Joseph Sewell was my first employer. I built for him what is now known as Risselport Number 2 in Waverly. I afterwards worked for George Wells Sr. So he's how he's working for people. This Thomas Jefferson's son. I did carpenter work for the brick building now owned by John, and so on and so on. Okay. Did he say she was from Africa? He said she was a slave. Okay. So this is false right here. It says here in the history of Virginia, it says Stephen Hughes was a large landowner near Charlottesville at the time the town was established. In 1764, he purchased from John Grills nearly 1,000 acres on Morris Creek, including the mouth of Biscuit Run. In June 1762, he bought from Colonel Richard Randolph of Henrico 500. So Randolph, there goes the Randolph family, which is Thomas Jefferson's mom's family again, lying mainly on the east side of the present Scottsville Road and extending from the limits of the town beyond Morris Creek. This tract of except few acres he sold 1765 to Creed Childress, who the same year sold it to Nicholas Lewis. His dwelling was not far from where the old Lynchburg Road crosses Morris Creek. All right, and that's a little bit about him, and that's about it. All right, and he still had slaves, yeah, but he still had his wife. Literally, it was his wife. What's her name? Chana or Ghana? Looking at Barry Cemetery record for Pike, Ohio, Chana shows up as Ghana. You see that? They literally did that. This grave says Chana, and they wrote up Ghana. Could this have been the actual name of her mother gave her, or that she took, or was given by her slave owner? Could they? They're guessing right here, because she was taken from Ghana, Africa, part of a terrible slave route, with a question mark. No, stop making things up. Stop making things up. And then they go onto this YouTube, right? And I went to the YouTube, and it's just a bunch of images, drawings of black folks being enslaved in colonial times. It has no sources. It has nothing to do with proving anything or proving that China's African. So this is why I named this true versus false narratives. I want you to see this is a pattern, guys. You're gonna find this every time. I find this every time there's a famous so-called black or African ancestor, the patriarch from Africa or matriarch from Africa, and it comes out that there is no records. The actual historians say, we don't know. Everybody else is making it up. Everybody else is running with it because it's music to the ears, because a lot of people go with the whole out of Africa theory. All we African slaves. It's part of Pan-African Afrocentric studies biases. That's why. I hope you hear me. I hope you hear what I'm saying. Oh, come on. Bring me back. So, let me just go back where I was. Okay, Chana. All right, Chani. No parents, not from Africa. Everybody was saying that she's from Virginia. All the families. Now, when it comes to her husband, who had all this land, right? Supposed to be a slave owner and all that. His dad is Thomas Hughes and Sarah Perkins, his mom, right? She's from Virginia, Henrico, Tuckahoe Creek, Tuckahoe. Thomas Hughes born in Northumberland, Virginia. His parents, Edward Hughes and Elizabeth Skiffins. All right? It's about to get really interesting. Guess who Edward Hughes is? Edward Hughes is the son of Niketi Mango P. Somon, Jane Eagleplum Powhatan. She is the niece of Pocahontas. She is the daughter of Cleopatra, Princess Cleopatra Shawano Matachana Powhatan, sister of Pocahontas. I bet you James Madison and the McCoys don't know this history. I bet you the Hemings coming out from James and McCoy, they don't know how deep their ancestry is. You guys already saw what we found through Thomas, and his mom, and their history going back to royalty, and then Sally and all the mixture. right? We don't even know Sally, like the whole history behind, the mom, Susanna. Like there might be a whole history. They might be Indians too. That's what I'm saying. These so-called slaves from Africa might end up being Indians that are being enslaved in this area. These are the first people colonizing these areas, guys. What did they do to the local Indians? They made a lot of them indentured servants, and then they made their kids the same status. That wasn't that wasn't based off of black African women only. We read the sources. They were doing this to Indian women. They were doing this to the indentured European women. So let's see if we can get some history here. Okay. But this is actual historical, guys. Like I looked into it. There was so many sources here when I got it first. Okay. Some of the tribes in the area. I mean, there was so many Indian tribes here. So Wedo Wokomoko, that's where they're settling. This family, right? Jamestown right here. Niketi Mangopes Wotan. She is often shown as being married to John Dawson, but I can find no evidence that such a relation existed. As with many Native American marriage articles, I believe it to be urban legend at best. So she is, again, the daughter of Cleopatra, the sister of Pocahontas. The Pamunkey Indian Reservation, just some general history on the Powhatan people. This is all taken from Wikipedia. All right. Hugh's descendants. Look, Powhatan Niketi spouse. So this is real. This is real history. Like these people know their ancestry. During these times, guys, you gotta remember, this is like 1500, 1600. You're not gonna find a census and stuff, but they know. These people know. All right, and remember who their ancestors to black folks. All right. Okay, let me go back down. So I'm telling you, right? All right. Now I gotta go the long way. Hold on, I gotta go the long way. So just to put into perspective, right? James Madison, Thomas Jefferson's son. Oh, where do we go? How did we lose them already? Okay, right here. So James Madison, right? Who went to pass on as black, him and his descendants. He married a so-called black woman, right? Mary McCoy is black. Nothing about her saying she's mulatto, or they call her mulatto. But when it comes to Jonathan McCoy, who's to say he's white, right? We need to prove that. And then when it comes to Elizabeth Hughes, we know Stephen Hughes. What is that? 1/4? What is that? 1/4 or half? How do you say that? I don't even know. He's the grandson. No, he's the great grandson of Niketi Powhatan. So how white could he be? So-called white, right? What I'm trying to say is he must have some melanation in there. Stephen Hughes and all these people. And then he's getting with a so-called black woman. So, okay, again, Elizabeth Hughes, right? And Jonathan McCoy, who's Mary McCoy, who's, right? Do the McCoys know? They go back to the Powhatan people and to Pocahontas and Cleopatra. And if they don't, I hope they do now. All right? That's what I'm trying to explain to you guys. I just decided to go up. For some reason, I didn't have to go up her line. I just wanted to prove that there is no proof that her grandma is an African. If anything, she might be Indian, because let me show you. Do you guys see Lightfoot, right? Lightfoot. Even though I thought that was an Indian name, I do see she might be Lightfoot, because a lot of people had Lightfoot. I don't know where they were getting it from, but they had Lightfoot for her. Let me see if it comes up. So this family had Lightfoot. Look, Ghana enslaved. They're trying to make her African. Yet she's a Lightfoot. That's her last name. Lightfoot is her last name. Now I know that sounds like it could be an Indian name, but guys, Lightfoot is English, Irish, and Scottish. It's actually Lightfoot is of Anglo-Saxon origin. It was named for a swift runner. You're light on your feet. Oh, you're fast, swift runner. The surname Lightfoot is derived from the Old English words laoth, which means light, and foot, which means foot. Occasionally, this name was applied to an occupational surname to a messenger. Hmm. Light on his feet. That's why Mercury got wings on his feet, because he was a messenger and a trickster Thoth. Messenger or Anglos, which means messenger, angel. Check out my Thoth video. All right. So Lightfoot, right? She's a Lightfoot. Her dad must be a Lightfoot. Maybe she's half Lightfoot and half Indian or whatever, servant, slave, so-called black. But where is it? Okay, there's definitely not Africa. So these people made that up. People just adding what everybody else. Look, this person put Africa or Albemarle, Virginia. Well, which one is it? That's two very different places, two different continents. It makes a big difference. You can't just put Africa or Virginia. That's a big difference. That can change the whole story and the whole narrative. And it did. That's what they did, guys. They changed the whole narrative from Virginia to Africa. That's what they did. Try to make all these people unrelated to all these people they're marrying and getting with and having children with, when it's just talking about human relationships. Unfortunately, in between of that human relationship, there might be a free woman, a person with a status who's free, and or it might be a person with a status who's not free. They get together, they have kids together. It's still blood, whether it was forced or by choice, or it's still blood. All right, so I hope you guys thought that was pretty interesting, right? And of course, oh yeah, and that's not the other thing. So when we get to Edward Hughes, right, which was her grandfather, yeah, her grandfather, Mary McCoy's grandfather, his wife, Elizabeth Skiffins, also is half. Her dad is James Skiffins, and this is all historical. And her mom is Sarah Powhatan. So she is actually the aunt of Niketi. so what does that mean? What does that mean? What does all this mean? That means that these people are related right here. These two are related. How so? Okay. Sarah is Cleopatra and Pocahontas' sister, Sarah. So Niketi is her niece. So what does that make them? Right? That would make them like, you guys do the math. You got second, third, fourth cousin. You guys do it. It gets too much right now. I'm trying to remember too many things. But you guys get what I'm saying, right? So Sarah, this is Pocahontas' sister. She got with James Skiffin. They had a child named Elizabeth Skiffins. Elizabeth Skiffin married the child of her niece. Married her niece's child. These people are related. All right? Distant cousins, but they're cousins. Okay. So let me see. What else I wanted to show? To make sure I showed everything. I just wanted to show you, make it clear that there is no like when it comes to them adding their Pan-African stuff and all that, and the whole thing that, oh, we are the black Jeffersons and we are the white Jeffersons, or we come from the black Jefferson. A lot of that is just misinterpreted, not understood. They're missing a lot of context. You know, if people really understood the history, right? So let me, just in case you're not believing me, that check it out. So Niketi's mom, again, Cleopatra, who is the daughter of Chief Powhatan, or Wanhusanak, Emperor Running Stream, Chief Powhatan. Yeah, and his mother Matatishe Plum Nonoma Powhatan. So what does that mean? That means that this lady who married Thomas Jefferson's son is related to Chris Brown. Is related to Chris Brown through Cleopatra and Pocahontas. All right, they're related to Chris Brown. And talking about Chris Brown, guys, His mom's side was very extensive. I kept finding a lot of things just like this, and I wanted to prove that they weren't, and I didn't want to rush it, but I'm almost literally done. I'm gonna go live with that soon. I'll probably do it just like this, members only again. But shout out to all of you that came through. I mean, I'm probably forgetting something, but I think I showed the main things. I mean, I showed his genealogy, I showed her genealogy, I showed all the you know, conjectures, and I try to show you the real truth. That's what the only thing that they can prove is what I'm showing you right here. This is what they can prove. Like this genealogy and everything else is just conjectures, right? Let me go home. Okay. So again, Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson. It's an American family. Literally what she named the book. The Hemingses of Monticello, an American family. An American family, not slaves, not the house slaves, the family. A family. The sisters, and even related, again, related to Thomas, possibly through that Parthenia. She's an Epps, possibly related to Thomas Jefferson as well, through the Epps side. Through the Epps side. Now, here's another thing I found. Okay, I did find another one I wanted to show you guys, actually. Thomas Jefferson, this is not no coincidence that these people descend from so many. Okay, here we go. This is another one. So before I go, let me zoom in. And I bet you I missed out on a lot of already genealogies. I could have probably kept going, and if I keep going up the European lines, I'm eventually going to do that, guys. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of videos, a lot of hours. I'm trying to get to as many people as possible first in the United States that are famous here before we continue to that. We have nothing but time, right? As long as we got internet. So it says here, Henry the First. Now remember what we learned about these people. These are black folks. Henry the First, King of England, married Matilda of Scotland. And then, right, it says illegitimate by Robert Kane and Earl of Gloucester, Mabel Fitzhammond. So through one of their legitimate kids, they had this, and then Martha Gloucester married here, and then keeps going down, right? You guys see the line, verify it, pause it if you like, try to debunk me, try to debunk everybody that wrote this and studied this, all right? So eventually it gets to the branches, right? And then Christopher Branch Jr., don't know who they married, but they had a kid named Mary Branch who married the grandfather, let me see, yeah, the grandfather of Thomas Jefferson, who was called Thomas Jefferson as well. And then they had Thomas Jefferson, who was sorry, I'm messing up. Thomas Jefferson the first, that's his great grandfather. Then he has a grandfather who's the second, Junior, who married Mary Fields, who possibly might be so-called black in history. That's why they call him a mulatto, somebody new, possibly a servant, possibly some Indian in her. Peter Jefferson, who married Jane Randolph, and these are the parents, right? These are the parents of Thomas. Oh, I didn't have the other page. I thought I did. Hold on. Thought I had the other page. My fault. I didn't attach, but yeah, Peter. So that's how Henry. So we got Henry, and we had the other guy again. Let me see if I can see that again. So who knows how many royals really he comes down from? It's probably a lot. That's my point. It's probably a lot. And here we go. So King William. So King William the First and Henry the First so far. Thomas Jefferson, right? And even the Epps, on the Epps side, his wife. Okay. But hope you guys found this interesting. We're gonna do a little documentary now for the dismount. I almost forgot. All right, now that we got a little context behind everything, I'm glad. So Sally Hemings, the documentary, fair use for education purposes only.
Sally.
For education purposes. All right. We're going to go ahead and start that now. Again, thanks for being here today. Get a little treat before everybody else for being a channel member. We're going to look into this documentary regarding Tom and Sally in history, right? I might pause it sometimes just so we can, but just be ready just in case, guys, to dodge the hijack now that you got a little context behind it. All right, dodge the hijack. Do I have to stop it? All right, let's go. Enjoy, guys.
Sally Hemings, a slave woman whose name will be forever linked to one of America's founding fathers. When 3-year-old Sally Hemings arrived at Monticello as part of an inheritance for Thomas Jefferson, she could not have guessed the adventure her life would become. But when we examine Sally's life and the difficult choices she made, we are forced to focus less on the possibility of a romantic relationship between man and woman, and more on the disturbing dynamic between slave and master.
Dodge the hijack.
She was a mother. She was a slave woman. She was an African-American woman who did the best she could for her children.
She would have to find a way to live as best she could, which tells me that she had to be a very strong woman.
The story of Tom and Sally is the longest-running miniseries or soap opera in American history.
How she felt about him? Who knows? Being owned is not exactly a desirable state of affairs.
They were together longer than some marriages exist. Yes, I understand she was a slave, but I also know that slaves did fall in love at some time with their masters.
Jefferson is so symbolic of the contradictions in American history. Sally Hemings has been a symbol as well of the denial of African-American oral traditions.
The papers were covering it as if she were Monica Lewinsky. Was it a scandal? Of course it was. Do we look at it with new eyes? I think we do.
In November 1998, a tantalizing mystery about the private life of Thomas Jefferson yielded to science, shedding light on one of America's most complex and controversial presidents, and his slave named Sally Hemings. Through a DNA study, scholars found that in all likelihood, the author of the Declaration of Independence had a sexual relationship with Hemings and fathered her children.
It was the weight of all of that evidence that led us to believe that there was likely a relationship between Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings.
This was front-page news around the country, but to the descendants of Sally Hemings, who had passed it down for more than 2 centuries, it was considered common knowledge. The details of Hemings' life are sketchy, even contradictory, and the facts hard to pin down. There are no photographs or drawings of her, but from what is known, Sally lived a remarkable, courageous life as a slave, presidential mistress, and mother. The first Hemings to put Sally's story into the public record was her son, Madison. In 1873, the 68-year-old Madison dictated his memoirs to an Ohio newspaper reporter.
The Pike County Republican decided they were going to do a series of stories that had to do with ex-slaves. Madison was one of the most well-known ex-slaves that lived in the community. As a matter of fact, all of his neighbors knew the story of what his purported lineage was.
For the first time, Sally Hemings' life was presented to the world. Sex with Captain Hemings produced a daughter, Betty. The girl grew up as a slave on the tobacco plantation of a man named John Wales in Virginia. Betty would have a fate similar to her mother's.
John Wells had been married several times and his wives had died. He took her as his concubine, and she bore 6 children for him.
One of their children, Sally, was born in 1773.
All right, guys. So remember, I hate to stop it. Remember, she not mentioned anything about, oh, he took her slave as that's his sister-in-law. That was his wife's sister. The mom was her mom's sister. These are people who are very related. It's not just how they're telling the story, right? It's like, this is what I'm saying. So, remember, Hadash Sahajah.
Even though her father and 3 of her grandparents were white, making her 3/4 white, Sally Hemings was still considered black. and a slave.
So status, right? Status. Even though she's 3/4 white. I mean, I got the other thing, guys. I told the AI when he was to create the images, right, for the thumbnail. I said, hey, I just put Tom Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Not put Tom Jefferson wife Sally Hemings. That's all I put, guys, and it gave me her being so-called black, like this. It gave me the one in the thumbnail, and it gave me some other ones. They knew. They even the AI knows. You know.
Baby Sally had a white half-sister named Martha from her master's first marriage. The year before Sally was born, Martha had married a wealthy 29-year-old revolutionary named Thomas Jefferson. By all accounts, Thomas and Martha were deeply in love. The year after Martha's marriage, her father died. She inherited Betty Hemings and her children. Sally was just 2 years old when she moved to the Jeffersons' mountaintop estate, Monticello. At Monticello, Thomas Jefferson listed Betty and all her children in his farm records with their last name, an early indication that Sally would lead a life quite different from that of most slaves.
I think it's clear that the Hemings family was different from other enslaved families at Monticello.
The sort of up front and center slaves at Cello were almost all Hemingses. Almost all of them were very light-skinned. Some of them looked almost completely white. It was a way in which Jefferson, in some sense, concealed from others and perhaps even concealed from himself.
You guys hear that? Some of them even passed or even look literally white.
The reality of slavery by giving it a face that looked more acceptable.
Special treatment, however, did not mean a life of leisure. Young Sally, like all slave girls, went to work as soon as she was old enough.
If they were the children of house servants, as Sally Hemings was, they might care for the young children of the plantation owner. And this was probably the case for Sally Hemings.
So her plantation owner or brother-in-law and her nephew and nieces she's taking care of. You guys understand the way they tell the story? It keeps you remove that family part. That's their aunt. That's the kids. That's Aunt Sally. Get it? Aunt Sally. Literally. Not just a slave woman who takes care of us. They love her. That's her aunt. That's their Aunt Sally. She takes care of them like that was her nephew and nieces, and they were.
As she grew older, her responsibilities would have increased, and she would have gone into weaving and spinning, learning how to make cloth, and from there she would have been trained specifically to do a certain type of work.
Sally did have one advantage that many slaves did not. She was raised by her mother and grew up with her siblings. Sally was able to work side by side with all her brothers and sisters, and perhaps her greatest influence, her mother, Betty.
So one thing, they like to do, now he just told us that a lot of these kids, even Sally and all of them, were very light-skinned, a lot of them almost white, literally looking like white people. So why, when they do these dramatizations, they only put one color complexion? They're not putting somebody who looks almost white. All right, this is what I've been trying to tell you. So they contradict themselves.
These years were busy ones for the master of the
They want you to picture slaves only looking a certain way.
Plantation as well. Long before he became president, Thomas Jefferson was shaping the American Revolution. In June 1776, the 33-year-old wrote the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia. His first draft included a passage blaming England's King George III for the slave trade and calling for its abolition.
Jefferson recognized that slavery was incompatible with the values of the Declaration of Independence and incompatible with the values of the American Revolution. But he was trapped within that condition, he himself a slave owner.
The Continental Congress rejected Jefferson's anti-slave passage as too controversial. Jefferson returned to Monticello after the Congress disbanded and served as governor of Virginia for the duration of the Revolutionary War. Sally Hemings and Jefferson's other slaves maintained a steady rhythm of life while the fight for independence was raging around them. Not all was well at the plantation, however. In the main house, Martha Jefferson had given birth to 5 children during the first 9 years of her marriage. Only 2 daughters survived. The strain of the pregnancies was devastating to Martha's health. Weak and exhausted, she gave birth to her 6th child, Lucy, in 1782. Then Martha's body gave out. Tradition holds that on her deathbed, Martha gave this bell to 9-year-old Sally. Thomas was at Martha's side when his wife died at the age of 37. Jefferson was inconsolable for weeks, but life at Monticello carried on. Young Sally continued to serve Jefferson's daughters, Patsy, Polly, and the newborn Lucy. The Revolutionary War ended in triumph the following year, but Thomas Jefferson was still depressed over his wife's death. So in 1784, he accepted a post overseas.
He was overwhelmed with grief, and in part he needed to flee the memories of Martha at Monticello, and so he accepted a post as American minister in Paris.
Jefferson took with him his oldest daughter, Patsy, and 1 slave, Sally's older brother, James Hemings. Young Sally, who by some accounts bore a strong resemblance to her half-sister Martha, stayed behind. After a few years, she would join her brother and her master in Paris, and her life would be transformed. In the mid-1780s, the teenage Sally Hemings had no way of knowing that she was about to be launched on a journey unlike that of any American slave. Her master, Thomas Jefferson, still in mourning for his wife Martha, had taken a post in France as the American ambassador. His oldest daughter, Patsy, was living with him, along with Sally's older brother, James. Sally was sent to live with Jefferson's younger daughters, Polly and Lucy, at their aunt and uncle's Virginia plantation. Sally's primary duty there was to wait on the 2 girls. While Jefferson was overseas, he received heartbreaking news. Both his daughters had contracted whooping cough, and 2-year-old Lucy had died.
Jefferson became more and more anxious to have Polly present with him in Paris, and wrote and said, please make arrangements to send Polly to me in France.
By the time Polly's trip was finally arranged, the middle-aged slave who was supposed to accompany her had fallen ill, so 14-year-old Sally Hemings was sent in her place.
We assume that Sally Hemings was chosen to be Polly's companion because she had been her companion through childhood and was considered her maid.
The 2 girls crossed the Atlantic and arrived in London, where they were met by the American ambassador, John Adams, and his wife, Abigail.
Adams was somewhat aghast because Sally, at this point, would have been between 14 and 15. Abigail Adams, to her horror, saw this young girl who she thought was wholly unequipped to handle Polly. But nevertheless, she had crossed the ocean with her and then made it there safely.
Just wanted to stop here real quick and just look at this image, guys. That Paris or England, but I mean, look at it. Look at the castles, and palaces, and these towers. Wow, old world architecture, right? They reset, they burn down. All right, let's continue.
The original plan was to send Polly's companion back to Virginia right away, but with Jefferson's approval, the plan changed. Sally would stay in London with Polly and move on with her to Paris. Smallpox was a problem in Europe, so the first thing Jefferson did upon Sally's arrival in France was to have her inoculated.
That probably was a somewhat frightening procedure, and you had to be quarantined for several weeks. So she was probably taken somewhere outside of Paris, because that was the law at that time.
Sally Hemings was now ready to embark on an adventure that most Virginia girls, much less slaves, could only dream about: living in Paris. Paris in 1787 was a vibrant, dynamic city. Exquisite architecture rose high above the streets, in direct contrast to the revolutionary mood of the crowds below. The 14-year-old slave was deluged with new experiences and fresh ideas.
While she was there, she was given, it is believed by some historians, some tutoring in the French language. She also was given training as a lady's maid, which meant not only was she taught to do the hair of the ladies in the fashion of the day, but she was also taught to launder fine linens and clothing. And then she was taught as a dressmaker in the highest order.
More importantly, slavery did not exist in France.
While she was in Paris, of course, she was free. So Sally was a slave that tasted freedom. I think Sally was able to see herself in a way that gave her a level of self-esteem that she probably never would have had she remained at Monticello.
All right, so Sally, since she was little, she was taught to, stitch, make clothing. She's older here. She's being taught not only to stitch, but the fashion. She's with the fashion people and the high elites in France, all that. So she's living a glamorous life in France, So again, this is not just any slave, and they did this with many so-called slaves, guys, 'cause a lot of them were family of the so-called slave owners.
Sally's older brother, James, had come to Paris with Jefferson 3 years before to be trained in the art of French cooking. James, no doubt, taught Sally how to interact with the French servants in Jefferson's household and helped her learn French customs and culture. James was also being paid for his services. Soon, so was Sally.
As long as she stayed in France, she was a free person. And so she was paid as a servant would be. However, not as much, but at least she experienced being paid for what you do.
Sally also had the unique experience of living on her own when Jefferson sent her to a boarding house for more than a month. The owner of the house, one Madame Dupré, was the Jefferson family laundress.
Dupré. I bet she was black. I bet you.
Jefferson's daughters, Patsy and Polly, who attended a convent school, also introduced Sally to other sides of Parisian life.
We know very little directly about Sally Hemings' duties in Paris, but we know that by the end of that time, she was acting as lady's maid to both Polly and Patsy Jefferson. Some of Polly and Patsy's classmates at the convent actually had their maids living there, and it's not impossible that Sally Hemings might have spent some time at the convent.
Sally's world broadened even more when Patsy turned 17 and began to attend social functions with her father.
We assume that Sally Hemings would have certainly prepared her for these outings, but probably accompanied her on a number of them as well. There are indications in the fact that Jefferson suddenly began buying Sally Hemings more clothing at the same time that he bought his daughter Patsy more clothing.
There were letters that came to Patsy from friends that she had in Paris, and in the letters they always mentioned Sally. Sally seemed to be more a part of what was going on in Patsy's life than she would have been at Monticello.
It would also seem that Ambassador Jefferson was one of those who began to treat Sally differently in Paris. In fact, her son Madison Hemings makes it quite clear in his memoirs that, during that time, my mother became Mr. Jefferson's concubine. The teenage slave from Virginia had forged a completely new life in an exciting and foreign land. Soon, Sally Hemings would be forced to make a choice between the freedom of Paris and returning to America with Thomas Jefferson. In the late 1780s, Sally Hemings was a slave living in a country where slavery didn't exist. She was living in the home of her master, Thomas Jefferson, the American ambassador. The teenager was growing into a stunning young woman, affectionately called Dashing Sally, and described by others as handsome, with long hair flowing down her back.
The relationship between Jefferson and Hemings probably started in the late 1780s when they were together in Paris, and she was about a 14 or 15-year-old girl.
By 1788, the widowed Jefferson was waxing eloquently in letters about the domestic virtues of American women and life at home.
Jefferson talks about women in his letters as the guardians of virtue in that family unit, and a belief that the bucolic, rural, farming world of Virginia is his real favorite and his ideal.
Jefferson was homesick. With his daughters away at school, perhaps he found Sally to be a link to the world he romanticized and yearned for in Virginia. But their relationship might not have been as romantic as their home in the City of Lights suggests.
The debate now has been, was it love or was it rape? And that, in one sense, is an unanswerable question. I have always thought that there had to be some semblance of respect. I don't know if love is too strong a word, but that's something that held those two together.
It was probably, in some sense of the term, consensual, meaning both parties agreed to it, though it was clearly rooted in Jefferson's power. Jefferson owned this woman, and so to call it consensual between master and slave seems a bit of a contradiction.
Jefferson may have been truly attracted to Sally Hemings, perhaps even loved her, but that could not change her station in life.
I think that he had affections and feelings for Sally. I think he was probably very possessive about her as well. But in the meantime, it was okay for him to keep her family and her in a situation where they lived as house servants would live. In the private time, when no one's around and it's just the two of them, of course, now you have man and woman.
And how she felt about him? Who knows? Being owned is not exactly a desirable state of affairs. He could break his promises at any time to her, so she managed him very well, I think.
In the Paris of 1789, Jefferson was enjoying his role as a patron saint and advisor as the masses stormed the Bastille and launched the French Revolution. Then his well-ordered world came crashing down.
Patsy threatens to convert to Catholicism. As soon as he hears that, he removes her from the convent and makes plans to return to Virginia.
Still, Jefferson had an even bigger problem.
According to Madison Hemings' account, Sally Hemings was pregnant at the time, and she didn't wish to return to Virginia when Jefferson and his daughters were returning.
The other thing that Sally did while she was in Paris was that she learned to bargain. Naturally, she and especially her brother Jamie did not want to return to the enslaved condition again.
Jefferson convinced Sally's brother James to return to America by promising to give him his freedom if he would stay home long enough to teach a replacement what he had learned of French cooking. Sally finally agreed to go home to Monticello as well, but not before striking her own deal.
Thomas Jefferson made extraordinary promises to her, including the fact that her children would be freed at age 21.
She took him at his word, and a number of people say to me, why would she trust him? And that's a very difficult question to answer, but evidently she did and believed that he would do what he said.
So what I want to add here, again, they're saying, how could she? You guys, this is what I'm saying. Like, the way they tell the stories and the way they dressing her right here like that. Like, what if she didn't dress like that? But anyways, um, they try to make it seem like, what if she wanted to be with her family, right? That's where she grew up. And then they're going off a whole. These are African slaves that are being forced to do everything, and yeah, like if anybody's being forced, there's indentured servitude. It was both Europeans and Indians, not Africans. And a lot of the time, they're just doing domestic. They're just literally providing their services, and it's for a number of years as a contract. People get stuck in those contracts. They become chattel. There was abuse. There was a lot of abuse, and there was evil people mistreating others. But this is why they want us to be like, oh, how could she go back? She wasn't living like that. Her lifestyle was different. Like it told us earlier, she was chilling while the revolution's going on. They were okay. She's not going through. There's nowhere that I read she went through racist or that there was KKK or people trying to drive her out because she's black or anything like that. She wasn't going through any of that. That's not even part of the history. It's not even mentioned. All right. So this is why they're like, oh, they're trying to explain, but they're saying literally she trusted him. She made a deal with him, and it's family, man. This is her brother-in-law and her partner now, you know, father of her kids.
The account of Madison Hemings of Jefferson's pledges to Sally Hemings suggest that she had some measure of control over her own life, that there was some mutual trust between the two of them.
Sally and James sailed back to Virginia with Jefferson in 1789. Madison Hemings' memoirs state that soon after Sally returned to Monticello, she gave birth to a child, of whom Thomas Jefferson was the father. It lived but a short time.
There's no record of this child in Jefferson's records, but he didn't have complete records of the slave population at this time. Was there a child? We don't know whether it was a boy or a girl, what the child's name was. None of that is really known.
Jefferson returned to a burgeoning political career. While he was in Europe, the United States Constitution had been written and adopted. He was called on by President George Washington to serve as the nation's first Secretary of State. Jefferson divided his time between the capital in New York and his beloved Virginia. On the mountaintop at Monticello, Sally Hemings' life had also changed drastically. Sally became pregnant again in 1795, during a period when Jefferson was at home in Virginia. She gave birth to a daughter in October of that year, but the girl died at the age of 2. In 1796, Thomas Jefferson ran for president, but came in second to John Adams. In accordance with the Constitution at that time, Jefferson became vice president. The two men disagreed strongly about national policy, a situation that quickly stirred up intrigue and backstabbing. Sally Hemings might have thought that she was far removed from the political wrangling, but accounts of her relationship with Thomas Jefferson were about to become fodder for newspapers across the country. By 1797, Sally Hemings had been back from Paris for 8 years and had resumed her role as a slave at Monticello. Her master, Vice President Thomas Jefferson, was away much of the time, plotting against his arch-rival and boss, President John Adams. Yet in April 1798, 25-year-old Sally gave birth to her first recorded son, Beverly.
A very striking pattern emerges from this comparison of this information, in that of the 6 children born to Sally Hemings that we know of from Jefferson's records, all were conceived when Jefferson was at Monticello, and several of them were conceived within 3 weeks of his return from an absence in Philadelphia or Washington.
Sally's duties at Monticello were comparatively light after her return from Paris. She took care of Jefferson's chamber and wardrobe, looked after the children, and did some housework and sewing. Hemings lived in several locations near the hilltop at Monticello before she apparently settled into one of the servants' rooms under the South Terrace. Jefferson's daughter Patsy, now 27, watched over the plantation while her father was away. 25-year-old Sally was obliged to follow Patsy's orders, regardless of her status as Jefferson's mistress, and the unspoken reality that Sally was Patsy's aunt. While Sally Hemings tended to Jefferson's home and the children, the vice president spent most of his time in Philadelphia, embroiled in the struggles of the new American government.
The relationship between Jefferson and Hemings made sense for Jefferson. He was a man obsessed with control. It meant that he could devote the bulk of his other energies to his public career without the customary obligations of a husband.
He had an unexpected bonus. He had Martha's half-sister. Now, having someone who's beautiful, has a spirit and personality and essence of this woman that you loved, but also someone that you own, gives you a situation where you can have your cake and eat it too.
They were together longer than some marriages exist. Yes, I understand she was a slave, but I also know that slaves did fall in love at some time with their masters. To say that there could be no feeling is to say that someone that is enslaved is not lovable. To say that there could not have been feeling on the part of Sally also says that a slave could not love.
Yep. So, she made an interesting point there, and that's what I'm trying to say. A lot of the times it's just people having relationships. And unfortunately, one has more power or status than the other. This is common throughout history. And this is what I was saying about comparing it to how the royals treat their illegitimate kids. This is exactly what went down in the royals' family in the houses, where you got one of the daughters who's a descendant, and she gets the throne and the inheritance, and then you got her aunt, who might be the sister to the queen, and she has no power. She has to serve the legitimate one, right? This is what I'm trying to explain. They brought that culture with them. That whole plantation, that was how they did it. And even in those families, they had relationships with their cooks, mistresses, servants, and they weren't calling them African slaves back then when they were in Europe. But a lot of it's the same thing a lot of the time, all right?
Whether it was love or just convenience, their relationship would not remain private for long. By 1799, a full-blown political war was raging in Philadelphia. Vice President Thomas Jefferson had secretly enlisted a journalist named James Callender to attack his political enemies, in particular, President John Adams. Criticism of government officials was illegal at the time under the Sedition Act, and Callender ended up in jail. His work didn't entirely tip the scales of victory in the next presidential election, but Jefferson did beat Adams, and Jefferson was sworn in as the third president of the United States in March 1801. Shortly afterwards, Callender was released from jail.
He'd served a year in this really miserable jail, and he'd suffered. So he said, okay, I'd like to be the postmaster of Richmond. And please also pay my fine that I had to pay, and I can't afford the $200. And essentially, Jefferson had said, you're too hot now. Goodbye and good luck.
Callender brooded for a year over this betrayal before he struck back in the way he knew best.
When Jefferson didn't give him an appointment as postmaster of Richmond, he turned against him, and he used whatever was at his disposal. Sally Hemings was just a tool.
Callender had picked up enough evidence of Jefferson's relationship with Hemings to write an article about it in the Richmond Recorder.
He broke the story in September of 1802 of the woman he called Dusky Sally. Well, the story exploded. After he found out that she appeared white, he stopped calling her that and referred to her as the African Venus.
A series of articles explained that Jefferson and Hemings had begun a relationship in Paris and that the pair had children. Callender wrote, "It is well known that the man whom it delighteth the people to honor keeps and for many years has kept as his concubine one of his slaves. Her name is Sally." Newspapers across the country picked up the story.
As Callender knew, the scandal in Virginia was not so much that the plantation owner was making use sexually of a slave, because that happened all the time. It was that he treated her with respect.
Jefferson himself never directly denied the allegation, but his supporters did. What they could not deny was that there was a slave at Jefferson's home in Virginia named Sally, and that her children bore an uncanny resemblance to the President of the United States. The public was titillated, but Jefferson played the scandal perfectly.
He did things according to the rules of that game. As long as he did take Sally down to the church and say, "We're going to get married," things were fine.
The story had no long-lasting effect on Jefferson's presidency, and in 1804, he won re-election by a landslide. As for Sally Hemings, no one knows if she had any reaction to the scandal or even saw the articles about herself. Even if Sally was literate, she left no documents behind. But almost 200 years later, DNA test would speak louder than any letter in her own hand ever could. The Jefferson Hemings sex scandal was still circulating in the newspapers of 1805, but Sally Hemings' life at Monticello maintained its normal pace. The 35-year-old gave birth to a son, Madison, that year. 3 years later, another boy, Eston, was born. Sally's master, Thomas Jefferson, was now 65 and starting to slow down. His second term as president ended in 1809, and Jefferson returned to Monticello for good. His oldest daughter, Patsy, had moved in with her 11 children, and Jefferson loved his role as patriarch and doting grandfather. It was a part he never played with Hemings' children, something that bothered Sally's son Madison a great deal.
Jefferson never acknowledged his paternity of Sally's children. Jefferson recognized that if he were to admit that he was the father, this would have been politically disadvantageous, very harmful to him at that time. But even more important to Jefferson was his own survival in the memory of posterity.
While Jefferson wasn't affectionate to her children, Sally Hemings did achieve one important victory. Jefferson kept the promise he made to her in Paris 30 years earlier. In 1822, Sally's older children, Beverly and Harriet, turned 21 and were noted in Jefferson's farm book as runaways.
There were runaways periodically over the course of Jefferson's life as a slaveholder, and he usually made an attempt to recover his escaped slaves and would expend considerable money to bring them back to Monticello.
But not Sally's children. They were allowed to leave. Harriet was even given $50 and put on a stagecoach. Noting them as runaways was an unofficial method of freeing them. Both passed as white, later married, and lived in white society. Jefferson's actions may have given them their freedom, but it was their mother, Sally, who traded her freedom for theirs
All right, so they went and lived in white society, right?
and prepared them for life after slavery.
Sally did give her children a head start in the world. She certainly raised them to be hardworking and skillful and literate. She taught them a way to get around in the world.
On July 4th, 1826, 4 years after freeing Sally's two children, and 50 years to the day after signing the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson died.
So be real quick before I continue, because we were just talking about his son Beverly being freed, and the way they did it, they said he was a runaway. This is who they're talking about right here, remember. This is what they're talking about right here. They put him as a runaway slave. Runaway slave. You guys understand? This is all right. That's what the saying is. The guy. That's what they're saying. He looks like William Beverly Hemings, father Thomas Jefferson, mother Sally Hemings. They had to put him as runaway, and he went to go be in what? In white society, right? White society, white, so-called white, 1860 census, right? This is real history. Go back.
In Jefferson's will, he freed only 5 of his 130 slaves. All were members of the Hemings clan. 3 were older men, well past their prime. The other 2 were 21-year-old Madison Hemings and 18-year-old Eston.
Not only did Thomas Jefferson free these 2 boys, he also made a petition to the legislature to allow them to stay in the state of Virginia. The rule at that time was that if you're a freed slave and you stay in the state of Virginia past a year, you automatically could become enslaved again.
Madison and Eston Hemings did stay in Virginia as free men. But Sally was not freed in Jefferson's will.
He actually told his daughter to free Sally after he had died. So she did what's called giving her time, which was letting a slave go and not requiring that the slave be chased down and recaptured.
She could live away from Monticello, and she could live with her sons and live out her days as a person who had freedom, but not quite.
Hemings and her 2 sons moved to the town of Charlottesville, near Monticello. She lived in a house on West Main Street until she died at the age of 62, 9 years after Jefferson. There is no record of where she was buried. Her sons moved to Ohio after her death. Even though they could have passed into white society like their siblings, they lived as black men. Later, Eston moved his family to Wisconsin and into white society.
So even though they could have passed as white, they went and became black. And then eventually Easton and his family did pass into white society. That's what I showed you.
Before the DNA results, the idea of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings' relationship was widely discredited. A slow accumulation of letters and documents over 2 centuries brought no definite answer, and oral histories were often ignored.
The simple answer to why no one has paid attention to the Hemings family history or any of the other slave histories up until now is racism.
In 1998, science intervened. New advances in DNA testing allowed for a sort of historical paternity test. Researchers examined Y chromosomes, which are the same in all male members of any given family. Blood from Eston Hemings' great-great-grandson was tested against that of several Jefferson men to see if the Y chromosomes matched. The test was positive. They were all genetic Jeffersons.
Taken together with all of the extensive historical evidence, this piece of information tipped the balance. It seems most probable that Thomas Jefferson was the father.
Finally, after all these years has gone by, they're going to have to spend their time trying to disprove themselves rather than me. When we look at our family, the descendants of Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson, we number probably anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 people.
And whether she loved Jefferson or simply accepted her fate, one thing is certain. Sally Hemings left a legacy to her children and the American people.
She was able to do in her lifetime what many other enslaved women wanted to do in theirs, which was to leave their children a legacy of freedom.
It's not a bad thing to have a mixed heritage. It's a wonderful thing. If America could just see that in their own families. And it's not about color, it's about family, and it's about loving and relating to people as people.
Okay, I wish I can play that right back. It's not about color. She did the major drop for the dismount. It's not about color, it's about family. It's about people having relationships and associating with each other sometimes. All those Junta Quinta false slave narratives got brainwashed into you. And then you try to relate all stories into that Kunta Quinta story, false fictional story. She said it right there.
America herself was built on imperfect people
Yes.
trying to come together as one.
Okay.
And they made so many mistakes along the way. Why do we assume now that those same people were perfect? And we hope that we can give somebody a gift from our heritage to say it's okay to talk about it.
Yes. Okay, and that's why, we do the genealogy and we show it and we show how complex it is and how people are so diverse and mixed and how much their family can change, who their ancestors are and who your ancestors are and everything. And look at all these deep stories we find. We find very deep, specific, detailed stories of our ancestors, of our families, and the stories we have context behind them now. We have real context behind them. We can't just, you know, keep believing everything they tell us and just running with everything and then just applying that to everything we read. Oh, she was a slave. Oh, what kind of slave? What do you mean by that? What was her parents? How was she obtained by these people? Who bought her? How did they buy her from? Where did she get sold? And who are these people? Are they not really being passed to their other family members? Who are these people on the wills when they're saying, "Oh, I give my two Negroes to my daughter"? Again, are these people related to your daughter? Are they your half kids? Are they half brothers and sisters? You're giving them to, and that's what I was trying to show. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode 17 of Genealogical Stories. Again, I got Chris Brown's mom's side literally almost done. I was just like, it takes a long time work in between because it takes hours just going on one line, going through all the hints and everything, make sure I find the correct people. But yeah, that's just what I'm finding here with Thomas Jefferson and um Sally Hemings story. All right. Hope you guys again enjoyed it. Again, this was a live private live for members of the channel only. If you saw this later on, it's because I made it public after the live. This was live at first. So if you want to support me that way, that's one way you can support me by becoming a channel member. And I am going to do more exclusive lives like this, or at least when I upload a video, I'll probably drop it for the members only before I make it public, just to give my thanks back to the members for becoming members and supporting me that way. And I also got the Patreon if you just want to support me directly there. I got a lot of exclusive videos there. The Chase R series is so hot. It's a lot of good history we're going over in the Chase R series. It's exclusive on Patreon. All right. So, but I hope you enjoyed. This is a part of a playlist. If you guys don't know that, let me just go ahead and show that right now, real quick. All right. You can go to my main page and hit playlist. And I have a playlist called Genealogical Stories. And this is the episodes right here. We got Web Du Bois. We got Tupac. We got Michael Jackson, Jay-Z. We got LeBron. We got John Wick himself. We got John Wick himself. And we got Chris Brown again, 2 episodes. All right. And we got Alexander Hamilton. We got a couple more videos there. And again, I'm gonna add this one right there. This is episode 17. Thomas Jefferson. All right, and Sally Hemings. So go ahead and check out the previous episodes. Again, do your genealogy. We encourage that. Try to do your genealogy if you can. Take your time with it. Ask your elders. Get the info. It's not that hard. And don't get scammed out there by anybody. I wouldn't trust anybody. Most people trying to charge you large amounts of money to do it. You gotta be able to figure out the website. Try to do it. Get some help by somebody who can. Then just do it on your own. But that's the playlist again. If you haven't tuned into that, go ahead and check it out. All right, again, thanks for tuning in. All you guys right now, especially the live with the members. All you know, I'm talking to the members now. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys coming through. Your Saturday, you know, it wasn't a big crowd, but it was very peaceful. I didn't have to worry about the chat, so I kind of like this vibe. I might do this more often, and then we'll make it public for everybody else. The trolls gonna have to sit through it if they wanna comment, you know, or whatever. But they won't do it in my live, you know. This was more peaceful. Again, thanks to you guys, the members that are here now. Appreciate you guys. Much love, my people. Much love. Pura vida. Pura vida, mi gente. Pura vida. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Hold on. Shabbat Shalom. Yeah. Shabbat Shalom. Wow. Yeah.